Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the infinite versions of our universe. Okay. Let's start off at the beginning. Well, the beginning of what is our observable universe, which was the Big Bang that happened 13.8 billion years ago. This is when our observable universe was born, which is finite, but the universe itself, which our universe is a small part of, is infinite and could have been born infinite. Since we can put a timeline on when our universe came into existence, which is that 13.8 billion years we just talked about, we can place a timeline on the things in our own universe. Everything in our universe is finite. But beyond our universe and the stars and galaxies and matter and all of that sciencey stuff is the universe, which would lead us to believe that there are many more infinite universes that are just like our own, but that are beyond our knowledge because of the fact that the speed of light, as well as the beginning of ours, the Big Bang, is finite. If there is an infinite amount of universe out there, then it only seems reasonable to believe that the same sort of creation of our finite universe happened an infinite amount of times.
Number 9, a familiar face. Username HighLife No Miller Lite posted this one a couple months back on Reddit. Great name also, gotta say, that's a really good name. It's since got a lot of attention, let me know what you think. They say, I'm from a very dry, hot state in the US, and I was visiting California on a trip with my wife. While out eating, we both witnessed a person that looked exactly like me. Same typical mid-fade and head dents inherited from my father. Same body type, only chubby, rather than my more slim and athletic frame. I saw the side profile from the back as they walked away from view, and it was my exact face. That's so creepy. My wife had a direct view but could not remember directly what my face looked like, but she noted similarities from my body to head and even the way that I walked. I couldn't believe what we saw. Any thoughts? Question mark. I mean, if you didn't mention the head dents and got that specific, this wouldn't have stuck with me like it did. I also love the subtle roast on the other you. You're like, yeah, this guy was just like me, only, you know, not ripped. Otherwise, that's quite creepy. Thanks for sharing. Number 8, quantum leap. So yeah, I went down that rabbit hole I talked about, and I discovered another TikTok. How fun, we love these, awesome. This quantum leap was obtained by Mayan Valenza. She took to the social media platform to implore others to take the leap. You know, no more manifestation Mondays. The key to these quantum leaps is a hot shower. Yeah, a hot shower, how convenient is that? Thank God it doesn't suck, you know? Thank God it's not a cold ice bath, or else no one would know. Valenza explains the first rule here. Number 1 is that you want to give yourself enough time, because you don't want to rush this, obviously. You want to do this with intentionality, she says. Yeah, sorry I'm late, boss. I don't want to rush my hot quantum shower. You know how it is. He's like, oh yeah, classic. Next step is to literally visualize the water cleansing you so that it removes all your limiting beliefs, the negative thoughts that you have, all the things holding you back from stepping into your higher self. Visualize not currently being late for work. And then there you go, you're set. I'm gonna try this tomorrow morning. I'm just gonna have a hot quantum shower and arrive at 10:15. Number 7, Sleep Street. This one comes from username Oopsies. It's like oopsies, but with a bit more O. Reoccurring dreams have never been so haunting. Forgot it's a dark list. Here we go. Ever since I was a teenager, I've dreamed about an alternate life where I go to university and work in a city that I've never been in. It started around when I was 16 or 17, and now I'm 25. It's super detailed, where I go on hikes, I hang out with friends, I bike through neighborhoods, and do mundane everyday life things. The university is outside of a major city, and I'm always exploring nature, beaches, islands, all that jazz. Last night, I was feeling sick, and in return had one of the most vivid dreams I've had in a long time. I met someone and developed a deep relationship that felt incredibly emotional and real. Luckily, I woke up right when I was trying to navigate Google Maps to drive to a park, so I remember the streets that we were on. The street was called Dutch Island Road. I never heard of it in real life, so I decided to look it up. The only thing that popped up was a rural area in Rhode Island. It wasn't exactly the same layout of the roads I remember on the map, but the nature and area looked eerily similar to what I saw while driving. I started looking around the area, clicking different locations, and I start to freak out on how everything looks just like in my dream. Mind you, I've never been to Rhode Island, but the weirdest part is that specific buildings in the Rhode Island University and Warwick area ones, those are the same ones that I saw in my dream all the time. I've always thought that my dreams are a glimpse of living an alternate universe, and I feel like this detail solidifies the potentiality of it being a reality. Thoughts? Too many big words. Those are my thoughts. Potentiality. I'm gonna start using that in the next list. You'll hear that from me in the future, for sure. Otherwise, so scary. Hope that goes away. Or doesn't? I don't know. Do you like it? I wouldn't like that. If I dreamt about an alternate life, I'm like, yeah, I actually have 2 jobs. It's exhausting. I never sleep. Number 6, good times, dad times. Coming from Reddit user Apprehensive Humor 55, they say, when I was young, from the ages of around 3 to 10, I was truly convinced I'd already lived a full life. I remember being around 40 years old with a wife and 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, and then one day I just woke up as a child and my past was all just a big blur with random memories that would come to me here or there. I'm smiling because this is funny, but like it's so scary. This is my biggest fear, I think, in life. It made no sense. My parents said that I used to tell stories about when I was a dad, and they would just laugh it off and be like, oh, that's your imagination, obviously. But deep down, I genuinely did have these strange memories of a past life. For instance, when I was 4 years old, my family went to Disney World, and the whole car ride down, I was telling stories about when I was a dad and I went to Disney World. Just a kid in the back seat with milk, like, oh yeah, these roads. Still haven't fixed them. The weirdest thing is that when we got to Disney World, I knew that I'd already been there before. I knew where everything in the park was and was essentially showing my family everything. At that time, my family just thought it was weird that I knew where everything was, but at the time in my head, it all made sense. To me, I just knew where all the rides were because of when I was a dad. After a while, I stopped telling these stories of when I was a dad because my siblings would always make fun of me for it. I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing, this is my worst, I'm laughing at you a little bit, this is crazy. Eventually, I just started going on with my life and haven't thought about much of it since, although I wish I did because the memories back then were much more vivid and real than how they are now. He's gonna be so confusing 30 years to his kids. He's like, when I was a dad for the first time, Disney was way less busy. Kids are like, first time? What other family? What are you talking about? Why is mom crying? That's so scary. I buy into this. I don't know, the afterlife, maybe that past dad died and then you're reborn? I don't know, that's scary. I don't want to think of it. Number 5, spirit animal. Do you believe in spirit animals? I kind of do. I want to, at least. Ever since I watched Harry Potter, I always wanted a Patronus. Mine would be a frog for sure. It'd be like a little lanky frog. Wouldn't be cool at all. This next one makes me want to believe. Coming from user Less Cold, they say, about 30 years ago, I was a young college student heading back to college after break in an overnight bus. I was about 19, didn't drink or anything, had no history of mental illness, and was reading a book when seamlessly I wasn't in the bus anymore. I was now swimming around a rock formation which I knew was part of my hunting territory and was chasing a fish, which I then caught in my mouth and could feel the bones crushing between my teeth and it wriggling against my whiskers. That's how they posted it, no in between. They're just like, yeah, I was reading a book and all of a sudden I'm a fish. I was totally at ease. I was fast and agile and I could feel the drag of the water, like, you know, the pull of the current, question mark. I like how they included that, mansplaining the current of the water. They're like, I being a fish know this, but do you know about this? I'm like, yeah, we know about currents, man. I'll continue. As I moved effortlessly through it, I knew my body and where I was going and what I was doing, and there was no alarm whatsoever that anything was amiss. You know, I didn't realize that I was really a 19-year-old on a bus. The whole experience couldn't have lasted longer than 30 seconds or so, and then just as seamlessly as I once was there, I was then again back on the bus. I remember sitting there for a second, staring at the page of my book before, you know, having a WTF just happened reaction kicked in, and then I had a bit of a mental freak out. Then a few years later, I saw a documentary about sea otters, and I knew then that that's what I had been for that brief moment in time. I knew it's impossible, but it happened to me, and surely I can't be the only one. I don't know, man. I've never been a sea otter before. Chris, have you been a sea otter? You don't think so. You don't think. You never know. Never say never, though. Has anybody ever heard of something like this, or has it happened to you? Have you been reading a book, and then all of a sudden you're a sea otter eating a fish with whiskers? If so, sound off down below. Sea otters are just smacking the keyboard. They're like, help me switch back. Number 4, switching universes. Coming from Mulks23, this one is so specific that it may very well just be real. Honestly, I'm a little convinced. I've been wanting to share this for some time now. A few months ago, one morning, I believe when I woke up, I did so to a different universe. Similar to ours, but different in some aspects. Before I went to sleep the night before, I kept my Surface tablet on my nightstand, and it was absolutely fine. The next day when I opened it though, I could see a large crack across the top. There's nothing, repeat nothing, that could have caused the crack. I was disappointed, of course, the tablet's new, but I didn't think much of it. However, over the course of the following days, I noticed some things/events are significantly different than how I remember them to be. An actress that I know was married to a gangster, is happily now married to a businessman. A different actress married said gangster, a name that I would have definitely known. I'm from India and I settled in US, and this is a Bollywood actress in question. A series that was being released on Amazon Prime is now on Netflix, question mark. Yeah, that happens all the time. I'm still asking those questions myself. I'm watching Harry Potter on like 3 different platforms, like what's going on? The movie Morbius, I've seen this movie. I thought they must have remade this or something, but nope, it was a new movie. A few other things as well, but those I can attribute to misplaced memories. Not the above though. Also, I definitely did not hit my head or anything which could have caused me to remember things differently. I mean, after all of that, I gotta ask, how is Morbius? It doesn't look that bad, honestly. Hope Spider-Man's in it. Thanks for sharing, Mulks23. Hopefully you're in the right universe. Number 3, cosmic commute. This one has me stumped, folks. I'm not gonna lie. Username IcyFlame2U says, in January, I left my friend's home at almost midnight. I live not even 10 minutes north of her. I remember getting in my car and then boom, I'm pulled over by the police. It's 2:10 a.m. now, and I'm 1 hour north of her, close to crossing state lines. In a city I have never been to, I don't even know how to get out there and what freeways I took, as we are not really close to any freeways. How did I get there, and what happened to a whole extra hour? When I returned home, I was having such anxiety from it all that I was throwing up and everything. We just don't understand what happened. The comments were supportive here. Some suggest to look into epilepsy, but the OP responded right after saying that they did, and luckily that wasn't the case. So, what do you guys think it is? Comment down below. I think definitely a time leap. That's pretty crazy. Number 2, dog treats and universe leaps. Anything involving dogs, I buy into it. I mean, who would lie about dogs for attention, right? Only psychos, I guess. Username mememan42069 says, when I was getting ready to go to my brother's house, I packed some stuff for my dog since he was coming. I put my dog's toys, leash, 2 dog shirts, and treats. I packed them all up, and when I got to my brother's house, I was looking for my dog's treats, and my dog's treats were not there. I vividly remember putting my dog's treats in a bag, and the weird thing was, when I got home, his treats were in the exact spots that I picked it up from, and it didn't fall out of the bag, and somebody didn't put it back because I live alone. So I was thinking maybe I slipped into a parallel universe where I didn't pack my dog treats. I've been weirded out by it for the past year, and I've been trying to come up with a better reason. I mean, that sounds alarming, 100%, but panicking about anything that involves dog treats, it's just hilarious to me. Sorry. Yeah, I hope you figure out your problem, but more importantly, I hope your dog doesn't get stiffed on treats again. And finally, number 1, 2016 again. This one caught my attention, caught it real bad. Posted 5 days ago by user Silence v Silence. They say, the universe is currently shifting, and it has been the past few days. The last time a change took place like this was November 2016-ish. Some of you already know this. I'm sure you felt it in the air over the past week like I have. It feels positive. I hope it is. First comment has tons of upvotes here, and it says, your ears ringing real bad too? Question mark. This is insane because my ears have been ringing a lot in the past month. I mentioned it to Olivia, swear to God.
Coming up at our number 10 spot, we have cosmic inflation. The first half of this list is going to be some scientific explanations for parallel universes, but don't worry, the science won't get that complicated because then I wouldn't be able to understand it either. First, let's start off by talking about the theory of eternal inflation. This is the idea that ever since the Big Bang, the universe has been rapidly expanding or inflating, and different parts of the universe have been inflating at different rates. This means that there are some sections of the universe that haven't really connected up with the rest, yet creating a sort of bubble universe. While our own universe has inflated enough to breed galaxies and stars and physics and science and whatever else, these other bubble universes are still in the process of creation. They have the potential to be the exact same to ours, or completely different from ours. Or maybe there is a you in one bubble universe that didn't get that bad haircut that you still really regret. One time, my mom cut my hair like Marilyn Monroe. It was brutal.
In our number 9 spot today, we have infinite universes. Piggybacking off of that last point, we have the fact that there just might be even more universes. Like, not just more of our kind of universe, but more of the universe. The Big Bang started off our universe, but it was not the beginning of everything. The Big Bang, which we all know happened when? 13.8 billion years ago, was the first time the universe could be described as hot, dense, and full of matter and antimatter and radiation and all of that, but there was stuff going on before that happened. Prior to the Big Bang, there was a period of cosmic inflation. This inflation leads to the growing of space-time, and this means that if that period occurred for an infinite amount of time, there could be an infinite amount of universes that are all finite, and one of these universes happens to contain ours. Does that make sense? This video really is all a person needs to feel exceptionally small and very insignificant. In our number 8 spot today, we have daughter universes. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. Let's try and make this the universe where this video has the most likes. Let's do it. This one is just a theory about if there are multiple parallel universes that exist and what they contain. This is where the theory of daughter universes comes into play. It is possible that multiple universes may follow the theory of quantum mechanics, which is how subatomic particles behave. Following the laws of probability, the daughter universes happen when you are faced with a decision. In our reality, you make your decision and it plays out one way, but in the daughter universes, they would each involve you making every other decision you could have made in that moment, which would then lead to whatever outcome that decision would have ended up leading to. This just means that there may be a universe for the opposite of every decision you've ever made in your life, and one for every decision anyone has ever made. How likely is this? I'm not sure, but if we ever find a way to jump to other universes, there goes the days of regret. In our number 7 spot today, we have bubble universes. For this one, we need to imagine our universe as a bubble, which it kind of is. The swelling bubble of our universe is just one bubble among many. Well, as we all now know, it is possibly just one among an infinite amount, all of which are swelling and expanding. All these bubbles make up the multiverse. This itself is of course just a theory that was made in an attempt to understand the origins and beginnings of our universe, but now it is being researched further. Physicists have begun studies on how and when universes might collide and bubble up together. I do understand that this is not concrete proof or evidence, but we wouldn't be researching it if it wasn't a possibility. This research could potentially lead us in the direction where we get to see some real proof, or at the very least, give us a better understanding into the theories of how multiple universes exist and how they could potentially interact with one another. In our number 6 spot today, we have the lack of evidence. This evidence is more so about the lack of evidence there is to say that the multiverse doesn't exist. Many scientists find the idea of the multiverse alarming or even unscientific because of the fact that there's no way for us to test for it. There is no way to make predictions that fall in line with data, and no way to really verify its existence, whether it's one parallel universe or an infinite amount. But there isn't really any evidence or data to support the theory that we are the only universe that exists. If our universe was created basically out of happenstance, what could stop another universe from being created at the same time or out of a similar happenstance? The idea and theory of the multiverse itself is relatively quite young and new, so it is possible that we will find the evidence to persuade most of us to one side or another, but as of right now, anything is possible. And maybe in another parallel universe, we already know all about the existence of this one. Maybe there's another me watching me make this video being like, oh, you don't know anything. In our number 5 spot today, we have the cold spot. The cold spot was first discovered in 2004, and it is basically just what it sounds like. It's an area in the universe that is slightly colder than that surrounding it. And when I say slightly, I really do mean very slightly. But when I call it an area, I'm talking about a huge one, as it is around 1.8 billion light years across. It was first believed that this area may be colder due to a lack of galaxies, but a newer study suggested that that is not possible, which led researchers down a different path in search of new theories as to why the cold spot exists. One of the most exciting is the theory that this may have occurred due to a collision between our universe and another bubble universe. A bubble universe is what we just spoke about in the last part, and they make up the multiverse, which would be the uncountable realms that all sit side by side, but that are in higher dimensions than our senses are able to interpret. This, of course, is a theory, and it will require a lot of time and research before we can say for certain, but it truly is kind of crazy to think that a huge, colder area of the universe could be due to a bump-in with another universe entirely. In our number 4 spot today, we have the CMB. After the Big Bang, it took around 300,000 years for things to cool down enough in order to allow atoms to form and to allow light to travel freely. This was known as the recombination, and during this time, that is when the cosmic microwave background began. The CMB is electromagnetic radiation that fills all of space, and while the space in between stars and planets and such may seem to be completely dark, the CMB is there and can sometimes, through sensitive enough technology, be seen as a kind of glow. So, how does this play into what we're talking about today? Well, scientists noticed a sort of bruise on the CMB during research, which left them wondering why. This is what led to this next parallel universe theory. If our universes are all like bubbles and one bumps into the other, it's possible that they may merge, even just for a second. This could cause some parts of one universe to spill into the other before eventually parting ways again, but this collision surely would leave some sort of a mark. And that mark just may be the bruise we saw in the CMB. In our number 3 spot today, we have the CMB Part 2. So you know what the CMB is now, and there's another thing we are looking for in it that might give us a sign of the multiverse. We thought we found evidence of this back in 2014, but it may have been a false detection, but we continue to look. Gravitational waves, which are ripples in space and time, are what we are looking for right now. The waves would have been left over from the Big Bang, and they could be putting tiny curls into the CMB. If found, this would prove the theory of cosmic inflation, which we discussed close to the beginning of this video in number 9, which would then lead us to the creation of multiple universes. It's all linked together in the most insane ways, but the universe is very cool and very complex. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Mandela effect. So, thinking about what we just talked about with the bruise and the CMB, and if our bubbled universes really did collide with some other universe, and they had a moment where they may have been interconnected in some way, then this would explain the Mandela effect. If you don't know, the Mandela effect began being widely recognized when people began to swear that they could remember Nelson Mandela passing away in the 1980s. This is of course weird since he actually passed away in 2013. This time discrepancy had people obviously confused, and it has happened with many other things such as the Berenstain Bears, the movie Kazam, and honestly a whole bunch of things. There are many theories as to why the Mandela effect happens, and one of them certainly is the belief in multiple universes and some sort of crossover happening between the two. This, coupled with the possibility of colliding universes, is hard to comprehend, but it does kind of make sense. In our number 1 spot today, we have the strange particle. This might be the most concrete evidence, but we still don't really know what it means. This evidence came to us originally in 2016, but it took a few years for it to be interpreted in the way that might suggest the potential of a parallel universe. During experiments and research in the Antarctic, researchers captured what seemed to be the signal of a high-energy particle. This would be all well and fine, except for the fact that instead of coming down from above, this particle seemed to be exploding out of the ground. Despite multiple attempts to explain why the signal was appearing this way, scientists were left with not a lot of options, and one of those has to do with the fact that this strange particle just may be proof of another parallel universe that is both exceptionally similar, but also the complete opposite of our own. In order to explain this particle, there would need to be the existence of another universe that was created during the same Big Bang that created our own and exists in parallel with ours. But this universe would have to be a mirror of our own, where left is right and right is left and positive is negative and time runs backwards. It's both the most simple and most complex idea that all started with one tiny, strange particle.
Number 10, the London Hammer. Many times in history, people have found objects that they think could be evidence of a parallel universe intersecting with our own. Those thoughts were raised again when in 1936, a hammer was found in London, Texas. While on a walk, a couple found a hammer that looked like ones that had been used in the late 1800s. So cool, they found an old hammer. Well, there's actually much more to it. The hammer had not rusted at all, and still hasn't since it's been found. And it was also found encased in rock that dated back to the Cretaceous period. For those of you who don't know, that's around 100 million years ago. This is obviously weird because most people agree that humans only started popping up around 200,000 years ago. So how could this hammer have come to exist? Some people believe that it's the remnant of a parallel universe where humans developed long before they did on our Earth, or that it had potentially traveled back in time. If you live in Texas and want to check out this infamous hammer for yourself, you can find it at Carl Bow's Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas.
Coming up at our number 9 spot, we have mathematical constants. Similar to that theory is the fact that everything in our known universe can be explained with mathematical equations. Think the Pythagorean theorem. Scientists know that the structure of our universe can be broken down into our mathematical structure. Math, that is, as they call it, without human baggage. They believe that because of this, it is entirely possible to hypothesize that there are other universes out there that are based around different mathematical structures, each universe having their own laws and rules based off of the structure. So infinite mathematical structures means infinite universes, some being just slightly different and some being totally, completely different. Coming up in our number 8 spot, we have backwards universe. 2 years ago, in 2020, NASA discovered what they believe is evidence of a parallel universe, one that is more than a little bit different to ours. Their team, called Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, or ANITA, had been working on an experiment in, of course, Antarctica for a few years. A so-called cosmic ray detection experiment reportedly found particles that seemed to come from another universe, one that was also created when the Big Bang took place. While this evidence alone is pretty astounding, they also discovered that the particles appeared to be moving in reverse, leading them to believe that they had found evidence of a parallel universe where time moves backwards. While parallel universes are often just the work of science fiction and movies, we may be closer to finding the truth of the situation than we originally thought. In our number 7 spot today, we have observable universe. Now let's talk about what scientists believe about the shape of space. In your head, maybe you imagine a big sphere or even some sort of donut, but most likely it's actually flat. And it stretches out infinitely, like forever, never ending. And if it goes on forever, then at some point it has to start repeating, because there is a finite number of ways that particles can be arranged within space and time. So if you looked far enough, you would eventually find another version of you, maybe wearing a different shirt or eating something different for breakfast. Maybe a version of you that didn't watch this far in the video, but hey, we like this version of you better anyways. Unfortunately, it would be pretty hard to actually see this far down the universe because our observable universe only extends 13.7 billion light years, this being the amount of time light has had to travel since the Big Bang. So you can consider the space beyond our observable universe to be its own sort of separate universe, one that we just can't see yet and probably won't for a long time, if ever. In our number 6 spot, we have time travel. Think about time travel for a second. Maybe you thought of Back to the Future. The concept of this movie is that if you go back in time and change one small thing, it can completely alter the future. Some scientists believe that time travel is a definite possibility in our future. So if it is, why haven't we seen anybody come back yet? And have they been screwing around and messing things up? Well, it's theorized that due to the way they would alter the universe, when time travelers go back in time, they actually create their own separate universe where things change. A parallel universe that works to include them in it. That would explain why we have never seen any real evidence of time travelers coming back to our current time, or even any point in the past, because they did not travel back in time in our universe, but instead to their own unique one. Am I melting your brain yet? Let's move on to some simpler stuff. In our number 5 spot, we have different life. For the second half of our list, we are going to be stepping away from science and taking a look at some people's stories of their experiences with glitches in the Matrix that may lend evidence to there being parallel or multiple universes. One day, a man was in his house when he became overcome with the urge to go outside and stand on his lawn. For a moment, he said he had the clearest feeling ever before he felt a slight wobble and everything began feeling slightly distorted. When it was over and he turned to go back inside, he saw his car in the driveway, the same make and model, but a different colored car. But that wasn't the only thing that was different. When he saw his wife, he said that she definitely looked like his wife, but he just had this feeling that she was different. He also started having memories that weren't his, and seeing buildings that, there was no way he could have never noticed in his time living there. Entire departments from his work no longer existing. Is it possible this man jumped to a parallel universe where his life was only slightly different? Maybe. In our number 4 spot, we have wrong memory. This one is a story of a false memory, seeming like an intense version of the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect being when a large group of people all share a false memory of something, which we mentioned in detail on the previous list. This person says that they vividly remember someone they know dying in a car accident, texting and driving and going off an exit ramp that was still under construction. They remember themselves and their family and friends attending the funeral and everyone in their small town talking about it for weeks. Skip to 10 years later. Even the person's fiance knew about it and knew the person's name because of how many times they had told the story. One day, their fiance is looking at their sister's Facebook page and says, "Hey, isn't that the girl who died?" The person came over to look, and it turns out that it was. Apparently also no one in the town after this incident had any memory of the car accident or the funeral that took place afterwards. So did this person potentially have a memory from a parallel universe where the accident had taken place? It's possible. Coming up in our number 3 spot, we have disembodied voice. People who believe strongly in multiverses and parallel universes usually believe that there are some places and occasions where the gaps between our universes are thinner, and it is easier for things to cross over or for the universes to communicate with each other. This story seems like one of those moments where the barrier was thin. When this person was around the age of 10, they were going to the beach with their aunt and friends when they were divided between 2 different cars. One of the cars didn't know the directions, so they were following behind the other car. When suddenly, it took a sharp turn and they had to follow and do the same, going around a very sharp bend. Suddenly, they all heard a very loud, clear voice in the car saying, "Sharp bend, The driver of the car hit the brakes as they all looked at each other confused, confirming there was no one else in the car that had said that. There wasn't even anyone close by outside the car who could have said it. So maybe it was someone managing to speak through the thin barrier between the universes, or was it a ghost? You decide. In our number 2 spot, we have the motorcycle crash. Sometimes people experience situations where the impossible seems to happen, and maybe it is impossible, but only in our current universe. This person told their story of a death-defying crash. 6 years ago, they were riding through town on a motorcycle going about 45 miles per hour. Suddenly, a woman who hadn't seen them turned left out in front of them, and despite the short amount of time, they remembered thinking about their options, whether they should go over or under the car. They laid the bike down and slid underneath the car diagonally. They slid across the pavement, no helmet, no jacket, just jeans and a hoodie. They slid about 80 feet before they stopped and were then able to stand up. No injuries, except a hole in their sweater, their bike having been completely mangled and torn apart. They knew that there was no way that they should have survived the crash, but somehow they did. A potential glitch in the matrix of the universe? Possibly. In our number 1 spot, we have takeout. Have you ever heard of Schrodinger's cat? Me either. The idea that if you put a cat inside a box with a bottle of poison, the cat is in a state of being both living and dead until you open the box and find out. Well, it turns out that, the food you ordered last night, your takeout, is also in a state of being your order and not your order until you open it up and find out. A man and his friend went to a Chinese restaurant where they ordered a chicken dinner and a shrimp dinner. When they received their boxes and opened them both, they realized that they had received 2 shrimp dinners. No big deal, just a mix-up. So they close the boxes and get ready to go ask for a replacement. But before they do, the friend opens the first box again, and instead of the shrimp dinner they had clearly seen before, it was now a chicken dinner, what they had originally ordered. They knew what they had both clearly seen. Was it possible that for a few seconds they had received their lunch from a parallel universe where they had ordered something else? Maybe. In our number 10 spot, we have Chick-fil-A. There is something called the Mandela effect that is a term that was invented to describe a situation where a large group of people remember a situation different than how it is. But of course, if you brought an entire human race into a new dimension, how else are you going to explain how so many people remember different events and situations that happened to the ones they're being presented with now? Naturally, you would invent a term to convince everyone into believing that their memories are false, and what they remember was influenced by a common eye trick or a memory trick. Like in the case of Chick-fil-A. A large group of people remember the famous restaurant without a K. I am one of those people, actually. When doing my research on this, I thought the incorrect spelling was with the K, but in fact, Chick-fil-A always had a K apparently. The thing that nobody can question me on specifically is a memory I have of looking at a Chick-fil-A sign and thinking, as a kid, why isn't there a K? So take that, government. It's a very specific thought memory that you can't influence. Who else remembers it without a K? Let me know in the comment section below.
Number 9, black holes. The existence of black holes is one of the greatest yet unexplained wonders of our universe, the first picture of a black hole only having been taken back in 2019. So how are they evidence of parallel universes? Well, let's get into some science here. Black holes are so hard to study because everything we've sent out there to try and get information is never seen again, people assuming that it's destroyed upon entering the hole. But Stephen Hawking said that whatever enters a black hole does come out, but it comes out in another universe. Because of the law of conservation of mass, even if something is destroyed, evidence of its presence would still be able to be seen. They would be visible in hair-like images that trace its path into the black hole, but Stephen Hawking noticed that evidence showed these hairs were not present, meaning the item has completely disappeared from our universe, and I'm really hoping this is making sense. Stephen Hawking says that this is good evidence that they have been transported to another universe, saying black holes are not the eternal prisons that we once thought. Number 8. Cloud City. In October of 2015, Chinese citizens were shocked by what appeared to be a floating city within the sky. Multiple people taking photos and videos of the cityscape that seemed to loom above them within the clouds. The shape was far too specific to brush it off as being anything man-made, and looked to clearly be a cloud city. People were left wondering what it could be, and theories popped up of parallel universes or even secret holographic technology. There was no time to answer these questions or speculate if it had even happened at all, as the exact same thing took place again in China in March of the following year. More photos and videos popping up again of the incident. Many people believe that this supposed city in the sky is evidence of another universe crossing over into our own. Feel free to take a look at the pictures for yourself and make your own decision. Number 7. Deja vu. Have you ever been walking down the street and gotten the sudden feeling like you'd done that before, even though you haven't? This is a phenomenon that is known as deja vu, or already seen. As of yet, there is no real scientific explanation for why people all over the world experience these feelings, and there are theories that range from memory problems to glitches in the Matrix. People who believe that deja vu is evidence of parallel universes describe it like this. Think of a radio where you can only hear one frequency at a time. The parallel universes beside us are at different frequencies. However, it's possible that for one small moment the universes might vibrate at the same frequency and become in sync. Since parallel universes are all supposedly just slightly different, when these in-sync moments happen and you believe that you've already had this conversation before, it's possible that you feel that way because you did, just in a parallel universe. Number 6. The double slit experiment. Okay, this one is very sciencey, so bear with me. The double slit experiment was performed in the 1920s and seemed to offer convincing evidence of potential multiple parallel realities. The theory proposes that if tennis balls were fired at a wall through a single slit, then the marks on the wall would line up with the slit. So if you created 2 slits, it would create 2 lines on the wall. And if you fired waves through the wall, they would go through the splits, but still continue to spread out and leave multiple lines on the wall. And electrons should theoretically act in the same way that tennis balls do, but they didn't. They also made multiple lines as though they had been interacting with each other in the way that the waves did. But even when fired one at a time, it still made 2 sets of waves. For this to happen, it would mean that each electron somehow managed to travel through both slits. When they tried to film the electrons, they instead went back to just forming 2 lines like tennis balls. So this suggests that while parallel universes may be interacting with our own, we just don't have the technology to see it. Number 5. The blue rock. Alright, after that, let's go to something way more simple. In fact, let's go to something as simple as a rock. In 1990, in Sierra Leone, West Africa, an archaeologist found a puzzling bright blue stone. When it was sent for studies, it was found that it was not similar to anything that could be found on Earth, and it was determined that it was not from this planet at all. One person who once held the stone said, "It was perplexing and I had no idea what I was looking at, and I had no point of reference to compare it to anything else I had previously seen or handled before." Parts of this stone have come into the possession of many collectors over the years, and it is incredibly highly valued, likely because many people believe that similarly to the London Hammer, this is an artifact that has traveled to our own Earth from a parallel universe. Number 4, the Mandela effect. The term the Mandela effect first came around in 2009, when a woman named Fiona realized that she and many others shared a false memory of Nelson Mandela having died in prison when in reality he was still alive. She created a website to explain her observance of this phenomenon, shocked by just how many people all over the globe could possibly share this false memory. Over the years, many people have come together to share different examples of this Mandela effect. Some of the most famous ones being the spelling of the Berenstain Bears title, Darth Vader saying "Luke, I am your father" instead of "No, I am your father," and Curious George having a tail. Many people believe that a possible explanation for this is that the false memories are correct, but they're correct in a parallel universe, the memories bleeding over into our own world, as how else could so many people share this same fake memory? Number 3, the cold spot. Alright, back to science once again. When the Big Bang created our universe, the wavelengths of light expanded, changing the color and temperature of the universe to what we now perceive as black, creating the cosmic microwave background which maps the creation of our universe according to the Big Bang. While scientists were studying this background, they discovered what they referred to as the cold spot, being the size of 1.8 billion light years. While also being colder, it apparently also contains 20% less matter than it should. So how could they possibly explain the existence of this cold spot and why it is the way that it is? Well, experts believe that this is evidence of a parallel universe having crashed into ours through quantum entanglement, impact forcing energy out of the area and leaving behind the cold spot. Number 2, the Hadron Collider. Researchers at the Super Collider in Switzerland started researching in 2015, hoping to find evidence of alternate universes. They have done various different tests trying to find these parallel universes that would not exist in the visible 3 dimensions of our own universe, but instead be made up of dimensions that we cannot perceive. One scientist theorized that the Hadron Collider could reveal particles that could only exist in these other dimensions, and being able to see them would give us almost undeniable evidence of the existence of parallel universes in line with our own. She said that these particles would have the exact same properties of particles in our own universe, but would have greater mass. All of this is still theoretical right now, but plenty of theoretical things from the past have been discovered and made reality, so it may not be long. Number 1, the Taured Traveler. In 1954, a European plane landed in Tokyo. On the plane was a man who spoke several different languages, and he told the people there that he was visiting on business. He then gave them his passport, which said that he was coming from a place called Taured. If you've never heard of this country, then don't worry, you're not alone. That's because it doesn't actually exist, and it's a fictional country that is in between the borders of France and Spain. The man's passport was visa stamped, and he even provided a bank statement from the Taured Bank. His documents were taken and held in airport security while the man was left in a guarded hotel room waiting for police to arrive. But when they got there, the man was gone. People believe that this man was a visitor from a parallel universe where European history was different and led to the creation of the country of Taured.
In our number 10 spot, we have the renovated floor. In one of the Reddit threads, a guy explained how once, when he was younger, he and his friend were at Portland University, and the specific building they were in had only a few floors. At the time, the building was undergoing some new changes. The walls were newly painted, new rugs, and some of the floors were still undergoing these changes. They had a meeting on the 3rd floor, so they got into the elevator and went to the 3rd floor. They were not prepared for what they saw though. The entire floor was so dark, the door to their meeting room was locked, and there were no people in sight. They looked out the window to outside, and there was nobody around. It was completely deserted, even though 5 minutes prior, it was busy outside. They looked at the stairs, and everything was old, perhaps straight out of the 70s, and nothing had been renovated, unlike what they had previously seen, 5 minutes ago. They went back into the elevator to the 2nd floor, where there was so much hustle and bustle, and their teacher confirmed that their meeting was indeed on the 3rd floor. They decided to take the stairs, which again they saw were actually renovated, and when they got to the 3rd floor, everything was the same except the floor had been renovated and there were tons of people. The boys are still convinced that they jumped through time, and I'm with them. Definitely definitely seems that way. In our number 9 spot, we have Skechers. This is another label that has been questioned over the last few years by many, and it has also been attributed to the Mandela effect. Most people agree that the brand Skechers spells their name S-K-E-T-C-H-E-R-S. But actually in this reality, okay fine, perhaps maybe just in reality in general, who knows, the brand is spelled S-K-E-C-H-E-R-S. There is apparently no T. This is another situation where I personally remember it being spelled with a T. When I was younger, I remember writing about it in a report for school, and I did not know how to spell it. I remember sounding it out, and then when I looked it up, I was surprised that it had a silent T. Somebody explain this memory, please. You cannot convince me that it is Skechers with no T. It just doesn't look right. I wonder at what age do people start thinking that there is no T? That'll give us a good idea as to when we got transported into a new dimension. In our number 8 spot, we have the Torrid Traveler. I had to include this story in here as it is such a wonder as to why it is not talked about more. Does the government not want people to talk about this for a reason? Possibly. In 1954, there was a man who was traveling to Tokyo, Japan, when he got off the plane in Tokyo and was pulled aside by security for having a passport from a country that didn't exist. The customs officials grilled the man on why he had a fake passport and fake custom papers, and annoyed, he insisted that his passport and papers were real. He supposedly had all kinds of bank statements and documents from a country in Europe called Torrid. The police pointed to an actual country called Andorra, and apparently the man insisted that yes, that is where his country is, but it is called Torrid, and it's been around for thousands of years. The man was held in a hotel for several hours while the government analyzed his papers. The next morning, when the government went into the hotel room to speak with him, he had vanished back to his parallel universe, I think. In our number 7 spot, we have the case of Lorena Garcia. This is a very interesting story. I definitely think it is possible that this story was covered up, as it is a story that a lot of people do not know of and may be shocked to hear about. A woman by the name of Lorena Garcia woke up one morning to find that nothing was familiar to her. Her home, her friends, her job, she did not recognize a thing. She still looked like herself and had the same name, but her room and basically everything was different. The story made a few newspapers, but it eventually died, as it would, of course, if it is a story that a lot of people shouldn't hear about, so that we don't all start collectively putting the pieces together and questioning everything, as we probably would. People thought that she suffered from memory loss, however, all signs actually pointed to her being in perfect health, as well as nothing traumatic had occurred that would make anyone believe that theory. So, in conclusion, she probably slipped into a parallel dimension that the government didn't want us to know about. In our number 6 spot, we have the backwards universe. An experiment was done by NASA's Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, or ANITA. Anita, darling. A little 101 Dalmatians reference for ya. Gosh, I get distracted so easily. An experiment was performed high above Antarctica, where it was observed that there is a constant wind of high energy particles coming up from the Earth, and these findings showed scientists that these particles actually traveled backwards in time, which suggests a parallel universe. Quote, low energy subatomic neutrinos with a mass close to 0 can pass completely through Earth, but higher energy objects are stopped by the solid matter of our planet, according to this report. That means the high energy particles can only be detected coming down from space, but the team's ANITA detected heavier particles, so-called tau neutrinos, which come up out of the Earth. Is this proof of another backwards dimension? Some scientists, such as Peter Gorham, believe it is possible. In our number 5 spot, we have Star Wars. Luke, I am your father. Okay, this one could very well have been misconstrued over time, as people have repeated this in many movies, and it's possible that someone somewhere just decided to throw in the Luke bit so that people understood which character Vader was the father of. Makes sense. But still, in online platforms, people are convinced that at some point in time, Darth Vader said, Luke, I am your father, instead of what is actually said, I am your father. No Luke. Is this a sign that in another universe, Pierce Luke was actually said? I don't know. This is a bit of a weak sign for me, but others disagree. Would love to know your thoughts in the comment section below. Did the government cover this one up? In our number 4 spot, we have the triangle phenomena. The Bermuda Triangle, the Alaskan Triangle, the Nevada Triangle. These are all strange places that puzzle people around the world. These are places where planes and people have gone missing on many accounts. It could be a strange coincidence, but a lot of people believe that these disappearances are more likely a sign of a portal to another dimension. Perhaps these people and planes traveled through these portals and ended up somewhere else, as not a body or piece of the planes have ever been found from any of these places. There has to be some explanation. Either that, or it's a government special operation, or there's mythical creatures getting in the way. There are so many theories around these triangles, but the number 1 theory is that they are a sign of a parallel universe. In our number 3 spot, we have unidentified objects. Over the years, there have been a lot of unidentified objects that have popped up around the world that no one can explain. Archaeologists have discovered items that don't belong in areas that they are exploring, and at times there have even been objects that don't seem like they are a part of this world or from this world. A good example of this is a hammer that was found in London in the 1930s, and this hammer is said to be over 500 million years old. Wow, when humans weren't known to exist. There was also an object that was found that is a sort of stone-like computer that would have been from 2,000 years ago, and this object was found near a Greek island not too long ago. Many people believe these mysterious objects are traveling through dimensions and that they are a huge sign that there are universes that we are unaware of. What do you think? Let me know in the comment section below. In our number 2 spot, we have Area 51. Look, it is no secret that Area 51 is the most unusual place, and it is probably one of the most guarded places in the world, but why? The government's explanation is that it's a secret army operation place. Sure, okay. If we wanted to plan future attacks or train for future wars, we will definitely need a secret place to do those things. So that's a pretty good reason, and that's why it's believable to your average Joe that doesn't bother to look into it any further. But for the person that decides to look into some of the stories that surround Area 51, man, are there many. They might think otherwise. The most popular theory is that there is a parallel universe portal inside, as people in the surrounding area have reported disappearing and showing up in random locations. In our number 1 spot, we have the particle test. There is a large hadron collider that is the largest and highest particle collider and is 27 kilometers below the surface of the Earth, aka in an underground facility between the France-Switzerland border. It was originally designed between 1998 and 2008 by CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, as a collaboration project between 10,000 scientists and hundreds of labs and universities from over 100 different countries. It is believed that the purpose of this device was to create a black hole in reality, which may take us to a parallel universe. Regardless of what they were actually doing, they did stumble across something pretty crazy. Apparently, the scientists threw a bunch of particles around at crazy speeds and noticed that the particles disappeared for a moment, and they were able to measure how long the particles disappeared for. From this experiment, it has been assumed that the particles traveled to new dimensions or planes of existence when they disappeared. One of the scientists at CERN by the name of Aurelian Barau has even said, "The multiverse is no longer a model. It is a consequence of our models." Well, sounds like proof to me. The government's gotta do a better job at hiding this.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Katie rocks. You ever hop in the shower first thing in the morning and it feels like literal paradise? Otherworldly, some would say. Well, a new TikTok trend has me meditating in the shower now. Apparently, here we go. TikTok users left, right, and center are stepping forward, or rather backwards, with their claims on entering parallel universes. Nashville model Katie Rocks recently kicked this off, and she used the social media platform to recall a 2017 trip to Paris that some of her classmates claimed missed the flight, although Katie saw them with her own eyes. I remember walking on that aircraft past 2 of my friends and sitting like 3 rows behind them. Then the 4 of us took a taxi back to the apartments we were staying in while we were in school, and I distinctly remember this. 2 days later, they're talking about how they weren't 3 rows in front of us, and to this day I have no idea why they remember missing the flight. That's way too close to the plot of Final Destination. Honestly, this creeps me out just reading about it. I can't even begin to unravel this one, no way. The same user, Katie Rocks, posted again a month later, this time saying she's since discovered the ability to shift realities. Showers, hot Hot showers are the key, apparently. I would have guessed baths, but showers are cool too. We'll take those.
In our number 9 spot, we have The Show. There is a thread where a woman's son explains an experience that she had that she can't explain. She takes the train to work every day, and every day she sees a man that almost misses the train. One day he's running for the train and gets on in the last second and shoves her quite forcefully. The woman is shocked by this and gives him a dirty look as he never apologized. The man next to her asked her if she was alright. She said, yeah, and proceeded to turn around to find the man to give him a piece of her mind. But he wasn't there. He wasn't anywhere in sight. She turned to the man beside her and said, he got away quite quickly. And the man beside her looked confused. He had no idea what she was talking about. She explained to him that she was referring to the person that had just shoved her, and that only seconds ago he asked her if she was alright. The man had no recollection of asking her this or seeing her being shoved. Either she stepped into another parallel universe or something's gone wrong with her mentally. Hopefully it was a parallel universe slip. In our number 8 spot, we have the energy loop. This thread had me buzzing, as some of the ideas presented truly can make you feel like a kid again, looking up into the stars and wondering, what the heck is life? What is it? There is a thread where someone goes into a concept called eternal returns. A user stated, quote, the concept of eternal returns states that the entire universe as its whole will repeat and loop itself forever in the exact same identical way forever. From its start to its end, history literally repeats itself from the Big Bang to the universe's final collapse. The concept is apparently from Indian philosophy and can also be thought about in ancient Egypt, and eventually it was adapted by the Pythagoreans and the Stoics. The idea that the universe repeats itself would perhaps mean that then there are no parallel universes, but honestly, it's very confusing and I'm unsure. It's definitely something I'm going to have to mull over as I drink my evening tea tonight. In our number 7 spot, we have infinite realities. Another thread went deeper into the concept of infinite realities, and one user in particular had me thinking that it's very possible that parallel universes exist if this were to be true. He said, we are all the same consciousness split into infinite independent pieces, experiencing every infinite slice of reality independently as every living thing in every dimension at the same time. When you screw someone over or wrong someone, you are actually going to have to experience the other side of it as well. Every killer has had to live the life of his victim, etc. Because we are all the same consciousness ultimately. Damn, I love this take on karma, as if it's just inevitable as opposed to a punishment. This definitely aligns with the concept also of yin and yang and makes the most sense to me. In our number 6 spot, we have the glass of water. There is a Reddit thread where a guy explains that he is very particular about his mornings. He does the same thing. He gets up, grabs a glass and fills it with water, and then pours some cereal and watches Netflix in bed. He definitely gives me Sheldon vibes from The Big Bang Theory. I bet you he has a seat that no one's allowed to sit in, and I bet you no one can touch his food either, otherwise he won't eat it. On second thought, that's probably a good practice to have, as we just got over a pandemic. Anyways, this was a regular morning. He had a sip of his water, put it on his nightstand, and started eating his breakfast in bed while watching Netflix. Anyways, he was eating away when he got thirsty and went to have a sip of water when his cup was gone. He was very confused as he got up and went to the kitchen and found his cup in the cupboard. He believed that he slipped into another dimension where grabbing water in the morning isn't a part of his routine, and a lot of people seem to be here for it. Do you think he slipped into another dimension? Let us know in the comment section below. In our number 5 spot, we have the John Teeter thread. Alright, if you clicked on this video, then I'm sure at this point you have heard all about John Teeter. John Teeter is a supposed time traveler from the year 2036 that came to the early 2000s for personal reasons, he said, and engaged in a blog thread online. People have debated his authenticity for many moons now, with some predictions that seemingly have come true and some that did not. But one Reddit user commented something notable that I wanted to share. He said, please keep an open mind. John Teeter stated that traveling through time doesn't mean traveling linearly. But to travel, you must switch into another universe in which the time was set either in the past or future. John also mentioned that he could have already changed up the timeline just by being there, and things would change either way. That would definitely explain a couple of the wars that he said would happen that haven't yet, like the Civil War of 2015. There definitely has been civil unrest and distrust in society so much recently that I wouldn't be surprised if that was a part of our timeline very soon, but you know, maybe just a little delayed. Hopefully not, you never know. In our number 4 spot, we have the Macarena. Yes, the Macarena, that infamous 90s dance that almost everyone in the world knows that was born pre-2000. I can't speak for anyone after that. They have so many TikTok dances in their head that they may not have room for this one. A Reddit thread unveiled a very peculiar thing. Apparently, if you view the original music video for the Macarena, you would see that a few dance moves are missing and were never there. The thread went deep into where the heck did these extra moves come from if they were never there? How did literally everyone from around the world learn some extra moves if the music video did not showcase them? This one is super freaky to me as I play back all the times I have done the Macarena at weddings and school dances and parties, and it was always done with the extra arm movements. Where did they come from? Probably another universe. In our number 3 spot, we have the sweater. This Reddit user spoke about how she was getting ready one morning and grabbed her favorite blue sweater and put it on her dining room chair as she was grabbing a few of her things to take her dog for a walk. She went back to the chair to grab her sweater when it was gone. She felt confused. She just had it and put it on her chair. Where is it? She walked around the house trying to find it. She went to the laundry room to see if she accidentally threw it in the laundry. Nothing. She went to the washroom, the living room, she walked back into her room, and nothing. The sweater was not there. She went to all of the rooms 2 more times and still nothing. The sweater just disappeared. She's convinced that it got sucked into another dimension or experienced a time slip. And honestly, I don't blame her. Either that or some ghosts are playing a trick on her. In our number 2 spot, we have the dimension thread. Okay, not going to lie, this thread, really pulled me in. I had to read it slowly because the ideas presented in it are so hard to grasp, as they are just not our current reality, and it takes a minute to really understand the concept of there being other dimensions, bigger than that. But what is explained is that there are in fact 10 dimensions in total, and each one gets more trippier to understand. But through Googling this and learning about all 10 of the possible dimensions, you may see how it makes sense that parallel universes exist. One commenter said, "I am starting to believe time really is an illusion and our past, present, and future exist at the same time, but we only experience it linearly. So it's like we can only be on one place on the timeline at any given moment, even though the rest exists elsewhere." Another reader commented, "That's called experiencing this reality from a 3rd-dimensional perspective." Yeah, this convo definitely had me confused, but it sounds like it could make sense for our realities to exist at the same time. I definitely need to think this one through more, but very interesting. In our number 1 spot, we have the man from Torrid. Of course, there are so many threads about the infamous man from Torrid. There are also more people that have apparently popped up out of nowhere in this world, but the man from Torrid is the most popular story and, my personal favorite. If you haven't heard this story before, essentially one day a man was traveling to Japan in July of 1954, and when he was going through customs in the Tokyo airport, the security wouldn't let him through as he had a passport from a country that did not exist. The man insisted that the country did exist and that it was called Torrid, and it had existed for thousands of years. He pointed to the map where a country called Andorra exists now, and insisted that his country is called Torrid, but it is in the place where Andorra lies now. He was detained for a night in a hotel while the police investigated this case, but when they arrived the next day to the man's hotel room, the man was gone. He had completely vanished. Some say he went through a time slip, and some say that is probably just an old urban legend, but as there are many stories like this that have popped up over the last while, a lot of people believe this story to be evidence of a parallel dimension.
Alright, at number 10, we're going to be kicking off this list list with the multiverse theory. If anyone at home is not a fan of science or has never picked up a comic book, then you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. Information on this topic goes deeper than a fat kid in a ball pit, so I'm gonna give you the Cole's notes on this. Since 1957, when physicist Hugh Everett first suggested it, scientists have proposed the idea that we could be living in an infinite landscape of universes. There are a ton of theories on how this multiverse is composed, and I am not smart enough to break them all down for you, but I'll give you one example. A common idea is that there's a landscape of universes which are flat and go on forever, with universes sitting beside each other. Because this landscape is infinite, you can have universes that are drastically different. There could be universes where superheroes are real, and people read comic books about ordinary people to try and escape the stress of their super-filled life. And there could be universes that are so similar to ours but slightly off. Like you could have blonde hair instead of brown hair, or Twinkies could be healthy.
Coming in at number 9, we have the man from Torrid. Were we sent a man from another parallel universe, or did he arrive via some kind of portal or vortex? Our story here stems back to 1954 when a man was detained at the Japanese border after arriving on a plane from Europe to Haneda Airport. The man said he was on his 3rd business trip to Japan that year, and he had a wallet filled with a mixture of currencies, seeming to verify his business traveler status. When he presented his passport, officials were absolutely baffled, asking where he was from. Now the man, who primarily spoke French, said, "Torrid. Where is this mystery place?" He showed his passport again and the stamps that supported his travels. The only thing is, nobody had ever heard of Torrid. The company he was traveling to said that they'd never heard of him, and he was carrying a checkbook to a non-existent bank. When he was asked to point out Torrid on the map, he pointed to where Andorra is today and seemed confused and offended to be told that it's not a real country. He was detained in a hotel overnight while Japanese authorities decided what to do with him, but by morning he disappeared. Did he accidentally walk through a portal to another universe? Maybe.
At number 8, we have deja vu, that feeling when you swear you've seen something before, like you can feel it in your bones. Some people think it could be your instincts telling you what's going to happen, maybe like a spidey sense. Maybe we all have spidey sense, we just don't know how to use it yet. Where other people say it's a delay in the communication between your left and right side of your brain. It's like when you're in a conversation with a group of people and you say something, then someone in the group says the exact same thing that you just said, and you're like, "You never listened to me, you're being a bad friend." But what if it's none of these things? What if it's you tapping into the frequency of another universe for just a moment? If parallel universe theory is right, there could be infinite universes. So there could be a universe exactly like this one, but just a little bit ahead. Deja vu could be you getting a glimpse into this space for a moment and then returning back to our reality. This was suggested by physicist Michio Kaku in his book Parallel Worlds. Maybe every time you feel like you've been somewhere before, it's another version of you that has been, and for a brief moment you're connecting to them. If I could tap into this ability, I would make so much money gambling.
Filling our number 7 slot is Lisbia. So back in 1905, a man was caught by police in Paris for attempting to steal a loaf of bread. And I mean, geez, you guys, it's just bread, just let him have it. Cut the man some slack. They ended up taking him to the station and questioning him, and they soon realized he couldn't speak a language. He didn't understand or speak French. He spoke something that sounded like Esperanto but wasn't, and had different grammar to it. After trying to communicate with him for hours, they finally found a way to ask him where he was from, to which he replied Lisbia. And at the time, the police just thought that was his way of saying he was from Lisbon, but then he didn't understand or speak Portuguese, which sus, very sus. But again, it's fine because he could have been from Lisbon but been brought up somewhere else and never learned the language. Like, it is fine, I will give you the benefit of the doubt. Strange man. But then, when given a map of Portugal, he had no clue what he was looking at whatsoever, so the officers eventually realized the man meant Lisbia was a country. Whereat no one knows what happened to the man or where he went, but maybe he just crossed over back to his universe and made his way back to Lisbia. I don't know. Can I get a visa? I'd like one.
For number 6, we have strange artifacts. There have been items that are still puzzling archaeologists as to where they have come from and how old they are. It's like when you wake up after a blackout and you find a half-eaten, uncooked frozen pizza on your floor, and you have 30 text messages sent out to your ex and you're like, what happened last night? it? Well, this is kinda like that, but with more science. One of the best examples of this is the London hammer. It was discovered in 1936 and it seems to be a man-made iron hammer, but it was found in a mound of rock that's over 400 million years old. And I might be wrong about this, but I don't think there was any hammers back 400 million years ago. How did a human tool work its way all the way back to before the dinosaurs? Perhaps it was blasted through a wormhole from another dimension. Hopefully not with the guy who made it still holding on to it. One minute you're blacksmithing a sword and the next you're getting devoured by an 8-foot tall centipede. There was also the blue rock that was discovered in Sierra Leone. This rock was sent to research labs around the world, but no one was able to identify its origin or link it to any other known rocks.
Coming in at number 5 are the Beatles, and this one is debatable because it really comes down to whether we want to believe this person or not, so let's just go with it. So back in 2009, James Richards was driving home in California with his dog. We love a good doggo appearance. You are a good boy. Don't let anybody tell you different. Now he ends up pulling over because the dog has to pee, and we all know dogs have 3-second attention spans, so off it goes chasing a rabbit. Now James springs into action and starts chasing after her, but trips and hits his head on a rock and ends up unconscious. Like already this sounds like a very bad remake of Alice in Wonderland without the hallucinogenics, so what is going on here? Now when James finally woke up, he was next to an odd machine and a man called Jonas who claimed he found his body while on a work trip for the interdimensional travel agency that he worked for. Do you have openings, Jonas? Can I apply? What do you need? What do you need for the CV? I'm there for it. Either way, they end up talking for absolutely ages and start discussing the differences in pop culture, because that's apparently the #1 thing you want to know about a parallel universe, like not world leaders or climate change. Pop culture. Guess I'm a nerd. Either way, James ended up finding out that in Jonas's universe or dimension, the Beatles also existed. They were all still alive and they were all making music. And I know anyone can say that, but Jonas even gave him a cassette called Everyday Chemistry, which had Beatles songs on it that never existed in our dimension. Those songs are actually on the BeatlesNeverBrokeUp.com if you do want to check them out, but damn Jonas, you have my attention now.
Alright, at number 4 we have the Mary Celeste. This one has been baffling people for centuries. It's one of the greatest missing person stories of all time. It was back in 1872 when the Mary Celeste set sail. It was a cargo ship packed with booze and it never made it to its destination. It was found off the coast of Portugal with its entire crew missing. Not only that, but the cargo was intact, so they weren't attacked by pirates. The crew still had their belongings on board, so it was not likely that they left by their own will. There's a chance that the whole crew went mad and jumped overboard, or a portal from another dimension opened up and they all got sucked into a different universe. There could have been a bunch of dudes from the 17th century running around in a futuristic world. It would have been like every primetime show from the 90s with a time travel plot. They're from the past, but now they're in the future. What will they do? Find out watching Anchored in Time, 8 p.m. on Fox.
Filling our number 3 slot is the wrong Riverside. This one follows a woman called Carol Chase McElhaney who is driving from San Bernardino to Perris, California. Now on her way there, she passed a sign for Riverside, which is where she grew up, so she decided to make the pit stop there to relive her childhood and have some nostalgic vibes, because we all love a cheeky nostalgic vibe, don't we? She started driving to the street she grew up on, but her old house was nowhere to be found, and none of the houses were recognizable to her at all. And it wasn't like everything had been bulldozed over and reconstructed, it just wasn't the same. Straight up, it was different. Freaked out, Carol drove to her grandma's old street to find that that was looking different as well. She then went to the cemetery where both her grandparents were buried to find no cemetery at all, but a fenced up a lot with weeds everywhere in its place. At this point, Carol was like, am I being punked? Where is Ashton Kutcher? Like, is he gonna come out? As a final grasp at sanity, she went to University Avenue, a street where there were usually restaurants and hotels, but now there was just a bunch of graffiti and run-down buildings, and the people there were just off. No one was smiling, they were all wearing black, and Carol was getting the feeling that if she spoke to any of them, she'd be stuck in that place forever. But our girl did not give up there. She spent the next few hours trying to find something from her past in Riverside, and when she came up short, she finally went home. Years later, Carol's father died and was going to be buried at the same cemetery in Riverside, and when Carol arrived in town, everything was how it was from when she was young. So how did she happen upon a Riverside from a different dimension that was just bad, and now she's back in the regular one? I don't get it. I don't get it.
And at number 2 we have the cold spot. When you flip your pillow over and it's cold on the other side, that's because there's a small amount of cold radiation buildup on the other side of your pillow from a parallel universe. That thing I just said, That is completely made up. Cold radiation? I'm an idiot. The cold spot is actually an area in our universe that is 1.8 billion light years away. Through what's called microwave background mapping, we've been able to map the cosmic rays in the universe possibly back to the Big Bang. Through this technology, scientists were able to locate this cold spot. The reason this massive field was colder was because it had 20% less mass in it than it should. Why does this area have less mass? Well, because it was just hot girl summer. Don't you remember? Sorry if this cold spot is too skinny for you. Well, actually, some scientists think that this could be from another universe crashing into ours. The force of these universes colliding caused a massive amount of energy to fly out, thus making the area colder. This could be the doorway into another universe where the laws of physics are completely different from what we understand. Now you just need to make the 1.8 billion light year trip to get there.
And finally, at number 1 is the interdimensional tunnel. Now this story actually came from the book Hunt for the Skinwalker, and this particular story is about the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. Now this ranch is infamous for strange happenings. People who have spent the night there have seen things they don't even know how to talk about or explain, so how the hell am I meant to tell you guys about them? I can't. Well, in this book, a hunter that the author met described seeing an interdimensional tunnel open up on the ranch. He saw it through his binoculars, and initially it just looked like a bright yellow circle, but it started getting deeper and deeper, and that wasn't even the worst part. Then a huge faceless creature crawled out of the circle and then disappeared into the woods, and mind you, this massive shining portal was still open for business and ready to pump out more faceless monsters. Like, are we just gonna push that under the rug? I guess so. The hunter left the area ASAP Rocky and never went back there, but he's been utterly convinced ever since that tunnel or portal was to another dimension or universe, and honey, I believe you. You're preaching to the converted.
Starting off this countdown, we have the deck of cards. Now, I don't know about you, but normal deck of cards don't have number 1 cards. In replace, they have aces. But would you look at that? This odd deck had 1s, which makes me very uncomfortable. I don't know about you, but I've never seen this before. If we're playing Go Fish and you whip out a 1, I'm leaving. I'm sorry. Jokes aside, we have decks with aces because they can serve as the highest card or lowest. So it can serve as a 1 or more than 1. That's why we don't have 1s, according to Google, don't quote me. So I don't know where this person got their cards from, but it just seems wrong.
In our number 9 spot today, we have the hotel room. This story starts out with the storyteller explaining that this strange story happened when they were on a family road trip. They write, quote, "We stayed at a hotel for a night. Our room was nothing more than 2 beds and a restroom with a big mirror across from the beds. Everyone went to sleep but me. I stayed up playing a mobile game I was addicted to at the time. At about 2 a.m. I went to sleep. When I woke up, I noticed something was just ever so slightly off. The mirror was gone, the room had 2 separate bedrooms, and there were 3 beds. Apparently I was the only one who noticed it because my family called me crazy. Still confused to this day as to what happened." It's the small changes like this that would have me absolutely freaking out, because it seems small but you know something is off and different. I don't blame them for still remembering this day and questioning what exactly happened here.
In our 8th spot today, we have the map. Now let's get to a serious one. In 1929, a group of historians discovered something pretty strange. It was a map from 1513 written on the skin of a gazelle. It was created by a well-known admiral of the Turkish Navy. Well, what's odd is that the map included Europe and North Africa, the coast of Brazil, several islands, and even Antarctica, which was not discovered until 300 years later. Not only that, but it was said that Antarctica was not covered in ice. The last time that occurred was more than 6,000 years ago. So this whole thing just doesn't make any sense. How did this man map a continent that's been covered by ice for the last 6,000 years? Maybe he's from a parallel universe, or maybe the map is. In our 7th spot today, we have the stop sign. Again, another item that just makes me uncomfortable. Someone decided to create a lowercase stop sign, and it looks like it's like, stop, no, just stop. Like it's too gentle. As a wise movie once said, no, stick to the stuff you know. It's better by far to keep things as they are. Don't mess with the flow. Stick to the status quo. If you know what movie that's from, I automatically love you. But maybe this person was driving around in another universe. Who knows? In our 6th spot today, we have the Oumuamua artifact. Hopefully I pronounced that right, because in another video I didn't, so now I'm changing the pronunciation. Let me know if I get it right, just be gentle, folks. In 2017, this object was found flying by in our solar system. Now it's quite weird. It looks like a space rock, but it's not a comet or asteroid. It's too small and oddly shaped to be an asteroid. This thing is long. In fact, this is now the most elongated known space object. Not only that, but astronomers were shocked by the condition of it. Astronomers thought that the first space rock to enter our solar system would be a ball of ice and rocks like a comet. But this isn't one. Now, not only is it not shaped like one, but there's usually a cloud of dust and gas surrounding comets, and this object just doesn't have that. But before scientists could study it too much, it left our solar system. All we know is that the strange object came from another solar system. Or maybe a different universe, and that's why it's so weird and unlike anything we've ever seen before. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the archless McDonald's. Imagine this, okay? You're hungry, you're driving down a road, madly looking for places to stop and eat, and that's when you see it. Off in the distance, you see 2 golden arches, and you know exactly what awaits you. The one and only McDonald's. Except whatever universe this is in, McDonald's only has 1 arch. Like, hello, it's not Nick Donald's, it's Mick. So stop, okay? Or maybe someone messed up with the designing this restaurant, I don't know. Also, since when does McDonald's sell just bags of ice? Like, look at the sign. Bag of ice, $1. I mean, it's a steal nonetheless, but still, that's odd on its own as well. In our 4th spot today, we have the Ulfbert sword. Now, this is something scientists like to call an out-of-place object, and that's because the sword dates back from around 800 to 1000 AD, which is shocking since they didn't have technology to make such swords back then. Swords like this were made 800 years later during the Industrial Revolution. Not only that, but its carbon content is 3 times higher than other swords of its time. It also suggested that in order to make this sword, iron ore had to have been heated to at least 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? Again, they didn't have that technology to do that back then. So many people are perplexed. Well, there are a bunch of theories. One is that it was dropped by a time traveler, or 2, it might have come from a parallel universe. One that is far more advanced than ours. But let me know your theory in the comments below. In our 3rd spot today, we have Lost and Found. A number of people on Reddit have shared stories in which they have lost something only for it to reappear in a place where it's impossible to. So let me explain. So one man said that he was with his cousin at Home Depot. Before they went in, the cousin grabbed his wallet, but he didn't have any pockets, so he asked the narrator if he could put his wallet inside his pocket so that he didn't have to carry it around. He agreed and he zipped it into his track pants. After shopping around at Home Depot for a bit, they went to check out, but his wallet wasn't in the track pants. So they retraced their steps thinking maybe it fell out, but nothing. So they decided just to go back to the car and return to the store later. When they got to the car, lo and behold, the wallet was on the dashboard. Which is wild because the cousin literally handed him the wallet and he zipped it into his pants. Now, one person believes that what happened was the universe glitched, and maybe in another reality, the man just left his wallet on the dashboard. Somehow, those universes merged, hence why the wallet was on the dash. Now, it's all confusing how this stuff works, but that's me explaining it the most basic way possible. In our 2nd spot, we have the little dino-looking figures. In 1944, thousands of little dino-looking figures were dug up in Mexico. Only problem is that the pieces date back to 2500 BCE, a time when no dinosaurs were roaming around and people couldn't have possibly known about dinosaurs then. This is all according to scientists. So were there some other creatures that roamed the earth back then that we don't know of? Or is there a time traveling paleontologist out there? Imagine that, like Ross from Friends also being a time traveler. I love that. I don't know, or the object is from another universe. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the ring. Now this next individual has a similar story to the Home Depot boys. So for her, she was washing the dishes one day when she heard a clink in her sink. Her ring that she took off when she was doing the dishes had slipped and fell into the sink and down the drain. Now, it was just a cheap one, so she wasn't too concerned. It wasn't like her wedding ring. So she decided to just go on about her day. In the end, she forgot that the ring was even there. That was until a week later when she was putting on her shoes and felt something poking her toe. She emptied out her shoe and her ring clanked to the floor. So somehow, the ring went from being in her sink drain to in her shoe. Someone explain that to me. I don't know, maybe house elves are real.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the story of Carol Chase McElhenney. One day in 2006, Carol was driving through San Bernardino, California on her way to Paris, California, where she was going to stay for a few days. On her travels, she saw a sign for Riverside, which was nearby, and she decided that since her family had roots there, maybe it was time to stop in for a visit. As she went into Riverside, she realized that everything looked different from how she remembered it, and was unable to find her old house that she grew up in. She tried to go to the street that her grandmother used to live on, but that one was different too. And when she tried to visit her grandparents' graves at the cemetery, the whole place didn't even exist. Even the people who were living in the town gave Carol a bad feeling, and she didn't even want to get out of her car. She decided she would just be better off continuing on her trip and left Riverside. Carol didn't end up returning to Riverside until a few years later, after her dad had passed and she was attending the funeral. To Carol's surprise, when she went to Riverside this time, everything was as she remembered it from her childhood. Carol believes that day that she ended up in some sort of parallel universe form of Riverside, and she even said that she felt like if she left her car that day, she was going to get stuck there. In our number 9 spot today, we have Sam's story. A TikToker who goes by the name of Sam Doll posted their parallel universe story on TikTok. She starts off by setting the scene, which was at her then boyfriend's house for the first time. Basically, she wakes up in the middle of the night to go to the washroom, and this is when she sees a guy standing in her partner's room. She didn't panic and just assumed that it may be his brother who she hadn't met yet, and she assumed that he was just sleepwalking. As she looked closer, she realized that this man was actually smoking a cigarette and appeared to be in his 40s. This is when she sits up and says, "Hey." And just like that, the man disappears. In the end, she didn't end up waking up her boyfriend and instead told him about it the next day. To her surprise, he said that she needed to tell his mom because apparently his mom had previously reported a similar sighting. In the end, because of the fact that the two of them shared the same experience, she believes that it is possible that this man is living in that house, but in a different universe, and that perhaps there is some sort of a leak in between the two timelines, making these strange occurrences a reality. In our number 8 spot, we have the old story of the Green Children of Woolpit. In the 12th century, it is said that 2 children were discovered just outside of Woolpit, Great Britain, but what was so weird about them is that they had green skin. When the children were brought back into the city and given food and water, they refused to eat anything other than raw beans. Eventually, their green skin began to fade and turned into a more normal human color. One of the children passed away, but the girl continued to grow and eventually learned English. When she was finally able to communicate with those around her, she told the story of how her and her brother had come from a place that was in constant darkness called St. Martin's Land. Everyone from her town lived underground, and everyone had the same green skin. The girl and her brother were wandering around one day when they came across a cave, and they decided to enter. They kept walking and eventually came to Woolpit, and when they turned around, the cave they had been in disappeared. Did this cave act as a portal to an alternate reality for these kids? If so, I don't ever want to end up where they come from because it does not sound nice. Guys, before I continue on in this list, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out. In our number 7 spot today, we have the story of James Richards. In 2009, James was walking his dog when he tripped and knocked his head, rendering him unconscious. When he woke up, he found himself beside some sort of machine he didn't recognize, and there was another man named Jonas who said he had just found James' body while he was on a work trip for the interdimensional travel company that he worked for. What? The two ended up striking up some sort of conversation, I guess like you would when someone just casually tells you that they travel through dimensions for work. They started chatting about what pop culture was like in each of their dimensions, and they came to discover that, of course, the Beatles existed in both of their dimensions. Jonas ended up explaining that in his dimension, the Beatles were all still alive and they had never actually broken up. Jonas gave James a cassette tape of the Beatles music from his his dimension that certainly does not exist in ours. When James returned to our universe, he ended up uploading the tape to a website called thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com. In our number 6 spot, we have a story from Reddit that was posted by the user 2humfolk. One day, the writer was driving home from school and began trying to call their boyfriend using the hands-free feature. The phone didn't end up ringing even after 5 separate attempts, so they turned the phone off and then on again and tried one more time. This time the boyfriend answered, but it didn't really sound like the person they knew and loved, and they also sounded like they were pretty freaked out. He said, "Liz, is this you?" Liz kept saying hello, but wasn't getting an answer, and panicked and hung up the phone. Liz tried calling again twice, but there was no ring again. Luckily, on the 3rd try, another voice picked up the phone and asked, "Is this better?" Liz then asked who this was, and the voice responded with something unintelligible, and then they hung up. Liz continued to call the boyfriend until he picked up the phone. Sounding significantly more like himself and not panicked at all, Liz asked who was picking up the phone earlier, and the boyfriend explained that no one had picked up the phone because he had never received any other calls. When Liz got home and checked the boyfriend's call log, they realized that only one call had gone through to his phone. Liz made sure that they were dialing the right number when they were calling, and it was the correct number every single time. Who had been answering the boyfriend's phone? At our number 5 spot and halfway mark, we have another Reddit post from Tiger King Quentin. The user explains that this story takes place when they were 8 years old in Florida with their family and their friend's family for a 2-week vacation. The friend really wanted to go to Wet n Wild and begged for his parents to take them there, so they ended up going one day during the trip. The boy and his dad ended up going into the wave pool that day and were mainly staying in the shallow area. After a while, a larger wave comes their way and it takes the boy underneath the water. He realizes he can't feel the bottom anymore and begins to panic, trying to break the surface of the water. When he reaches the top and gets his head out of the water, he realizes that he is no longer at Wet n Wild, but is in the middle of an ocean a couple hundred meters from an island. He doesn't know where or what this island is, but after a few seconds he begins to feel lightheaded and sinks back into the water. Luckily, he then feels some hands under his arms and he realizes his dad is lifting him out of the water back at Wet n Wild, asking him if he's alright. Maybe this wave pool really did take this kid to an alternate dimension. In our number 4 spot, we have a story coming from Tokyo in 1954. At the Haneda airport, a plane from Europe landed and dropped off its passengers. As the passengers made their way through customs, one man told the officials that he was just on a normal business trip that he made regularly. He spoke French as his first language, but could also speak Japanese and a few other languages. Officials then asked him where he was from, and his response is where things take a turn. He said he was from a place called Torrid, which was on the border between France and Spain. When officials told him that the place didn't exist, he gave them a passport that had been issued by this country that isn't real. This passport had also been stamped, validating all of the previous trips he had said he went on, including his previous trips to Japan. Officials called the company that he said he was meeting with, and the company said that they had never heard of him or his company before. They then called the hotel he said he had a reservation at, and the bank that was listed on his checkbook. The hotel said that there was no reservation for him, and the bank just didn't exist at all. Officials thought that maybe he was confused, so they showed him a map and pointed to the country of Andorra, asking him if this is what he meant. The man began to get upset, saying that Andorra didn't exist and that it had misplaced Torrid, where he claimed to be from. Customs decided to detain the man and put him in a hotel room for the night while they decided what to do next. The next day, when they went to collect the man, he had totally disappeared with all of his personal identification and documents. Police searched for this missing man, but he was never found. Maybe this man somehow accidentally found himself in a parallel universe separate from his own, and I just hope he was able to make it back to wherever he was from and return to his normal life. In our number 3 spot, we have the story of a man named Jafar Vorin. Jafar was a strange man who just appeared in a village one day before he was picked up by authorities. The language he spoke was closest to German, but even then it wasn't quite the same. Jafar said he was from a place called Sakria and that he was searching for his brother who had been lost in a shipwreck. He couldn't point out where he was from, but was able to tell authorities some geographical information about where he had come from. He explained that his home had 5 separate compartments, or continents, called Sakria, Aflar, Aslar, and Uplar. He couldn't show anyone how he had arrived at the village, and he had no idea how to get home, so he just ended up living out the rest of his life in Berlin. It's crazy to think that maybe he was a man from another dimension and he ended up just getting stuck here. I feel bad for him, and I wish we could have helped him return home. In our number 2 spot, we have the story of Pedro Ramirez. Pedro was driving from a place called Seville to his home in Alcalá de Guadalajara on a November night in 1986. As he went around a curve in the road, he suddenly found himself on a 6-lane highway, and as he continued to drive straight, he saw tall buildings, unidentified structures, and grass that was 2 feet tall growing alongside the road. These were all things that were out of the ordinary for that area. He continued driving, and suddenly Pedro heard a voice that told him he had been transferred to another country in a different hemisphere. Pedro didn't know what to do, so he kept driving for another hour before stopping on the side of the road to take a look around. After a short break, he began driving again, only to come across a sign with 3 arrows pointing in different directions. One was labeled Malaga, the other was Sevilla, and the last was Alcabala. Pedro decided to take the Sevilla route, and after driving down it for a while, he stopped again. When he pulled over and got out of the car, he stood there for a second, and then when he looked back to his left, he saw he was standing right outside of his home. He tried to go back to where he had been before, but couldn't find anything that he had seen before, including the sign with the 3 arrows. Who knows where Pedro was for that while, but I'm very glad that he ended up making it home safely. In our number 1 spot today, we have the story of Lorena Garcia. One morning in 2008, Lorena woke up in a life that was similar to the one she was living when she went to sleep, but certainly not the same. At first it was just small things like her bed sheets and her pajamas, but when she got to work, things began to escalate. Lorena realized that her office wasn't her office and that she worked in the same building, but in a completely different department. She had never even met her boss before, so she knew that this couldn't have been a moment where she just got lost or confused. When she returned home after work that day, she was met by her ex-boyfriend, only to find out that he was apparently her current boyfriend. She tried to find the person that she had been dating for months, but he didn't seem to exist in this new life and world that she found herself in. Lorena began to seek psychiatric help because she was fearing that she was having some sort of nervous breakdown, but all tests revealed that she seemed to be of sound body and mind. The strange occurrences continued when Lorena asked her family how her sister was doing. Lorena knew that her sister had recently had shoulder surgery and wanted to check in, but when she asked her family, they were baffled by her claims and insisted that there was no surgery that had taken place on anyone in the family. Lorena couldn't find any answers to her situation and was having no luck with a medical explanation either. She is convinced that she went to sleep one night and woke up in a parallel universe that was altered slightly by small decisions that she had made. Honestly, after all of these stories, I kind of believe Lorena too. In our number 10 spot today, we have 2027. There is a TikTok user who claims to be a time traveler that actually comes from the year 2027. Of course, this isn't a time travel list, it's a parallel universe list, but don't worry, they also have TikToks that pertain to parallel universes. In fact, they claim that they are actually in a parallel universe in which there are no animals or people. He claims to have just woken up in a hospital one day, somehow left as the only sentient being on the planet. That's creepy, or a dream, I guess, depending on your outlook on life. Apparently he claims to be part of some sort of experiment where, although he comes from 2027, he is in a 2021 world completely alone. People of course asked for proof of this, and aside from a few shots that show empty streets and the like, he did post a clip of himself walking into a completely deserted McDonald's. There's boxes of food left on the table and a jacket draped over a nearby chair, which definitely leaves a sort of eerie feeling, like people were just in the middle of something and then they suddenly disappeared. In our number 9 spot, we have this story from Peru. The Marcohuesi forest in Peru has been called a doorway to another dimension for centuries because of all the stone figures that resemble human faces and religious figures, and because of the amount of people who go missing and never get found. There was a group of friends who decided to enter the forest despite all of these stories, and they ended up stumbling upon a cabin that appeared to have some sort of party going on inside. As the group went up to the cabin, they saw people inside, but all of the people were in 17th century garb, and nothing that was modern or similar to what the group of friends was wearing. One of the friends began to try and enter the cabin and was halfway in the door when the friends quickly pulled her back. After being pulled out, it was discovered that the half of her body that had entered the cabin was now paralyzed. If her body really did become paralyzed because it had entered another dimension, that would definitely explain all of those strange stone statues. In our number 8 spot today, we have The Trip. A TikToker and Nashville model named Katie Rocks took to TikTok to share a really bizarre experience she had that relates back to a 2017 school trip to France. This sounds like a dream, but when it came time to leave, things went a little awry. Basically, Katie remembers distinctly flying back home from France with all of her classmates and friends, but they all claimed that they missed the flight. She claims that she remembers sitting 3 rows behind some of her friends and that they all took a taxi back from the airport to the apartments they stayed in during their time in school, but none of her friends remember this at all. In our number 7 spot today, we have The Night at the Apartment. This story comes from the TikToker thegem_m, and it has to do with the time they think that they and a friend might have accidentally shifted into some sort of parallel universe. Basically, they start off by explaining that they and their roommate like to kind of run around their apartment complex in the middle of the night just for fun. So one night they're doing this and they went to duet a really funny TikTok in the middle of these escapades. After filming the TikTok, they go to watch it back, and this is when they both stand up and look at each other super confused. Basically, they both thought that they were in a completely different location than when they stopped to watch the video. Like, we're talking about a difference of like 100 to 200 feet in a completely different part of their apartment, and they both had the same feeling. They were both super confused and thought that they were in the same location that it turned out they weren't actually in. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Master Manifester. Okay, so parallel universe TikTok is alive and well and thriving, so much so that people are now even giving tips on how to essentially time travel or jump into the reality you want to be in. A TikToker named Marianne Valenza, who calls herself a Master Manifester, can be seen on the app giving people tutorials on how to jump into your most desired timeline, and she says that in the shower is the best place to do it. She explains that the location is important because water is such a powerful conduit to the entire process. She explains that the first step is giving yourself time because it's not a process that can be rushed, which, I mean, given what we were talking about, that makes a ton of sense. She goes on to say that you need to soak yourself completely in hot water while you visualize, quote, the water cleansing you so that it removes all of your limiting beliefs, the negative thoughts that you have. And if you can, quote, shampoo and lather with a strong smelling scent such as orange or cinnamon. Honestly, who knew that shifting timelines could be so easy, clean, and relaxing? In our number 5 spot today, we have The Shifter. Ashley Vask is a young woman from New Jersey who took to TikTok to explain that she has been shifting for a few years. She explains that her first encounter shifting into a different reality occurred by accident when she was listening to music. Basically, she shifts herself into a sort of Harry Potter world. She said, quote, I was obsessed with Harry Potter at that point. All of a sudden, I felt extremely weird. I woke up and I swear on my life that I felt like I was at Hogwarts. It was the craziest feeling. She did her research after this and found out about the phenomenon of reality shifting, and since then has begun practicing more and more, and now takes to TikTok to share her tips and tricks with others. She explains that her favorite method of getting into this world is what she calls the tunnel method. This sees her lying down, closing her eyes, and visualizing a tunnel in which she can see the Slytherin common room at the end of. In our number 4 spot today, we have The Dream Life. Mavi Juka is another Harry Potter world shifter whose TikTok account had about 200,000 followers. She used TikTok to explain how she used similar techniques as Ashley from before in order to achieve the appearance she wanted and also the family relationships she aspired to have. She also uses the shifting in order to head off to life at Hogwarts, and she said that for every 1 hour that passes while she sleeps, she experiences a month at Hogwarts. She explains that she doesn't use this power she's harnessed on friends because she doesn't want those relationships to be forced. In terms of her Hogwarts life, well, things are definitely more calm there than the wizarding world we are used to seeing, because she explains that Voldemort isn't a part of her Harry Potter reality. In our number 3 spot today, we have The Lesson. A TikToker named Mina, who goes by the username Your Soul Warrior, is helping people understand the multiverse and how it exists. She uses an example of a simple breakfast choice, either having a smoothie or pizza for breakfast. If you choose the smoothie, your reality continues on where you chose the smoothie, but there is also a reality in which you didn't choose the smoothie, which has another you in it living life under those circumstances. A small, inconsequential example that shows the complexity of parallel universes. She even took to TikTok to answer a really common question. Basically, it's the question of having a vivid memory from your childhood, but your parents swear that it never actually happened. Mina had an answer for this when she explained that this sort of thing is likely because you are pulling from another timeline and just don't realize it. She goes on to say that all of these timelines are running parallel to each other and to completion. It certainly is an interesting point of view on something that is actually quite a common experience. In our number 2 spot today, we have the afterlife. Okay, so basically the premise or the idea or theory that this TikToker has come up with basically relates to what they believe happens after a person passes away. Her name is Jolie and she describes herself as a philosophical artist. She boasts thousands of followers who she shares her theories with, and one of the most controversial that relates to this video is the theory that we never actually die and instead are just transferred into another universe, sort of like a cosmic reincarnation. She basically explains what is called the quantum immortality theory. She explains, quote, "If you're hoping that apocalypse is going to bring you that sweet, sweet relief, I'm sorry to burst your bubble. Quantum immortality theory suggests that nobody ever actually dies, that consciousness never experiences death." It's definitely an interesting theory, and one that I have no way of either proving or disproving, so how about you guys let me know what you think of this one in the comments. Are we on board? In our number 1 spot today, we have The Night Out. This story comes from a TikToker who was responding to another TikTok that asked users to share their parallel universe stories. Basically, she starts off by explaining that she was driving with this guy that she was dating after a night out. She looked down at her phone at one point to change the song, and when she looked back up, traffic was suddenly at a complete standstill. The car they were in was going 70 miles per hour, and they were just seconds away from rear-ending the car in front of them. She just closed her eyes and braced for the impact she was sure was about to come, but when she opened her eyes, she was instead on the freeway, no traffic in sight, everything was fine. She looked over at the guy expecting him to be absolutely shook like she was, but he was just chillin' and totally fine like nothing at all happened. So this is all weird, but to make things even weirder, after this night, the guy she was with, she never saw him again, his number was gone, she couldn't find anything to do with him. Like, it was as if he never existed at all. She is left with no answers as to what could have happened here, either in the car or with this guy. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Tea Time. This story comes from someone who has a very strange memory from when they were around 9 years old. They were eating dinner in their room for some reason that they can't quite remember. What they do remember, however, is being sat at their dresser, which had a big mirror. While sitting there, the storyteller's dad came in to check on them and asked if they wanted more tea, to which they replied yes. They picked up their empty teacup and handed it to him and watched as he walked out the door. In the next instant, they looked back over and saw their same teacup, completely full of tea, right where they had just picked up the one that was empty. They of course asked their dad about this after because what in the world is going on, and their dad said that he never came into their room at all. This story is bizarre for sure, but there's also something really eerie about it as well. I can totally see why this was one that really stuck with them.
In our 9th spot today, we have the knockoffs. Sometimes brand name pieces can be expensive, and we want the same or similar item but cheaper. That's where knockoff brands come into play. Take a look at these cereals. They're so similar, yet so different. So we got Cocoa Rice instead of Cocoa Puffs, we got Honey Nut Crispy Oats instead of Honey Nut Cheerios, Fruit Rounds instead of Fruit Loops, Marshmallows and Stars instead of Lucky Charms, Cookies instead of Cookie Crisp, and lastly, Kids Crunch instead of Captain Crunch. Now if I saw an aisle filled with those, I'd think I was transported to another universe.
In our number 8 spot today, we have a new phone. Okay. This one wouldn't be the weirdest one in the world, but it has to do with a lost phone, and I just can't get over how strange the place they found it was. So they write, quote, "My friend and I were talking to our roommate and her girlfriend one night. Roommate had just received her new phone and was sitting in bed using it while the four of us chatted. So roommate sat her phone down while we were all still chatting. She goes to pick it back up and it's gone. Like, she had just put it down for a few minutes tops before she noticed that the thing had poofed. I call it for her and we can't hear it. We take the comforter and the sheets off the bed, shake them all out. We look under the bed, behind it, everywhere we can. That phone is gone. Even though we hadn't left her room at all during our conversation when the phone disappeared. We tore apart the whole apartment trying to find it. Finally, we decided to try her car. It was locked in the trunk. We live on the 3rd floor and we were all in the same room watching her use it before it somehow teleported. There's something about finding anything in a locked trunk that seems kind of eerie and creepy, and couple this with how the whole thing is seemingly impossible, and you've got a lot of unanswered questions here. In our number 7 spot today, we have a server's nightmare. This story starts out with someone explaining that it comes from a time many years ago when they worked as a server at a restaurant. The memory begins with the quintessential server panic experience, where their coworker forgot to punch in the food order for a 3-top. If you work in the service industry, you know the absolute panic that sets in, especially if you're like me and never write things down. You can't go back and ask these people what they had when their food should already be out and on the table. It's a panic like none other. Anyway, so this coworker not only forgot to punch in the food, but also of course forgot what the order was. This storyteller was laughing at their stressed coworker who was obviously trying to figure out what to do, and while laughing at him, the storyteller threw out a random order at them. They said, quote, "It was probably fried mozzarella, a cheeseburger with no onions, and chicken fingers." While the storyteller was joking and just having fun, it turns out that somehow this was the exact order that the table had ordered and the person needed. It totally freaked the storyteller out, and they even made their coworker let them run the food to the table to make sure that he wasn't making it up. Turns out the storyteller was right and probably saved their coworker a lot of stress and hassle. In our number 6 spot today, we have the camp photo. This story comes from someone who has always remembered this strange thing that happened years ago when they were 12 years old and at camp. They explained that they were taking a photo on a disposable camera because cell phones were still in the flip phone phase, and considering the fact that they were 12, even if they weren't, it's not like they had a cell phone anyway. So with this disposable camera, they were taking a picture of 2 of their friends that they had made while at camp. This is all fine and well, of course, and honestly very cute, but it's what's seen in the photo that really has stuck with this person. They explained that in the photo, one of the friends appears twice in 2 entirely different poses. They explain that it still weirds them out every time they come across it. In our number 5 spot today, we have Employee of the Month. This story comes from someone who almost had a premonition of sorts. They explain, quote, "I was sitting in my office one day when my desk phone rang, and it is my undersheriff asking me to bring him all of the reports, dispatch logs, any documentation reference to a specific case, so I get it all together and start towards his office. I meet him in the hallway and hand him the paperwork. He asked me what it was. I told him it's the blank documentation you asked for. He then swears he never asked me for it, that he had just arrived and had not called my office. He was on his way down the hall to ask me to get it together." I mean, at the very least, I hope he gave this person a raise, because while this certainly was a weird experience, that's also the most efficient employee I've ever heard of. I hope that's not the new work standard though. Like, what do you mean you didn't anticipate my needs? In our number 4 spot today, we have the repeater. This story is one that only lasted for about an hour, but it definitely was a strange and confusing hour for the person who experienced it. Basically, it started when they were watching TV with friends, and they ended up landing on some sort of old 80s movie that they used to watch many years prior, but hadn't seen in quite some time. All of the dialogue from the movie came flooding back to them, and they remembered what each character was going to say next. Not so weird, our brains work in mysterious ways. This, however, seemed to open some sort of gate, because when they changed channels and were trying to find something new to watch, this person was now able to recite every line of dialogue prior to it being said, as if they had memorized it all, but this time it was with shows they had never seen before in their life. This then translated into them being able to predict what their friends were about to say right before them saying it. Again, this strange effect only lasted for about an hour before things returned to normal, but what a strange hour that would have been. In our number 3 spot today, we have the inside scoop. Maybe this is a parallel universe story, or maybe this person is just a bit of a clairvoyant or something of that nature, but whatever you want to call it, this story is definitely a weird one. They write, quote, "Sometimes I'll be talking to someone I've never met and very specific facts about them will pop into my consciousness out of nowhere, like this person had a golden retriever that died in 2009. Then they'll inevitably bring up the fact that I mentioned without me saying anything first, sometimes seconds later, sometimes years. This would be so strange and also so hard to navigate. You'd have all these things you seemingly happen to know about this person and now you have to avoid bringing them up until they do. It's like knowing someone's secret. That would be really weird. If you had this sort of ability, would you tell people or would you keep it to yourself?" In our number 2 spot today, we have the wake up call. This story comes from someone who is explaining a very scary moment that their brother experienced that is kind of unexplainable. They start off by saying that it doesn't seem as though their mom believes this story, but they definitely do. Most of that is because they saw their brother after this incident and could definitely tell that something had seriously spooked him. They write, quote, "He was sitting in the passenger seat driving home alongside my mom. A bright green car swerved and hit them, knocking bits and pieces of glass into his arm. He jolted awake afterwards, just in time to see the green car pass them. He claimed he felt the marks the glass left afterwards too." So basically, this guy might have somehow been in a reality where this accident really did happen, and then was able to jump realities to one with a better outcome. Or perhaps he was just temporarily transported to the other one before jumping back into this one. The possibilities really are endless when it comes to the multiverse, and I can totally understand how an experience like this would have somebody pretty shaken up. Whatever really happened here, I'm just glad that this person somehow ended up in the timeline where everything is a-okay. In our number 1 spot today, we have the boiler repairs. This story is a bit of a longer one, but it's so strange and truly like nothing I've ever heard before. It absolutely shocked me. This person wrote, quote, "This didn't happen to me, but to my dad. He works for a heating and air conditioning company, so he often has to go out to people's houses to fix things. About 5 years ago, he told me he had a bizarre dream where he went on a call to an elderly woman's house. He'd never seen the house or this woman before, but he said it was bizarre because of how realistic the whole thing felt. He fixed her boiler in the dream, chatted for a bit, and then left. About a week later, his company gets a call from an elderly woman needing her boiler fixed. They sent my dad on the job. When he arrived, he said it was the exact same house from his dream and the same old lady. He knew her name before he even had to ask, and knew his way around the house without having gone inside yet. When she opened the door, she said, 'Hi Gary,' and when he asked how she already knew his name, she said she had a dream last week that her boiler broke and that my dad is the one who came to fix it, so she just knew that would be his name. Two complete strangers never having met each other had the exact same dream that they would meet each other, and they did. The whole thing is so crazy. That would be so strange, but also so cool. It's almost like they were destined to meet each other in some way. Honestly, the unexplainable can be terrifying, but it can also be kind of nice and cool and truly mystifying. All I want to know now is if Gary and the elderly woman kept in touch.
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have the deep space radio bursts. Mystery fast radio bursts were discovered in 2007. These bursts flash for a micro instant, but emit more energy than the sun does in 10,000 years. The high energy surges of long waves have been detected 18 times over the past 10 years, and one burst in 2012 recorded in Puerto Rico occurred numerous times in the same pattern. Okay, this is what it sounded like. After fierce debates and a lot of head scratching, the source of the sound was traced to a microgalaxy 3 billion light years away from Earth. A lot of theorists have concluded that the sound is a space signal from another world, or a parallel universe looking to get in touch.
Coming in at number 9 are the crossroads. So back in November of 1986, Pedro Oliva Ramirez was making his way from Sevilla to his home in Alcalá de Guadaira. Kodaira? I hope I said that right. As he was turning a corner, he found himself on a 6-lane highway that had never been on the route before. Either way, he hadn't done the journey for a while, so he assumed it could have been new. He continued down the highway, but he started seeing weird things like 20-story housing units, 2 feet high grass bordering the highway, and just unidentified metallic structures. After finally clocking something was off, he suddenly felt hot as hell in the car and started hearing voices in the distance, one of them which was telling him he was in another country in a different hemisphere. An hour into the drive to seemingly nowhere, Pedro finally gets to a sign pointing 3 ways. We have Malaga, Sevilla, and Alcalabaya. Hope I said that right, I probably didn't. He took the Sevilla detour and 5 minutes later he was outside of his house in Alcalá de Guadaira, which literally wasn't even possible because he took the route which would have taken him back the way he came, meaning further away from his house. Like, how did man like Pedro drive 3 hours to a sign and then end up back at home within 5 minutes? He even tried retracing his route but never found the crossroad or 6-lane highway again. And a 6-lane highway going missing, that is a big deal, you guys.
Coming in at number 8, we have the Bernstein-Bears phenomena. Also called the Mandela effect, the Bernstein-Bears phenomena claims to prove the existence of parallel universes with subtle differences. People vehemently claim that the Bernstein-Bears were spelled with an E and not an A, and honestly, I for one absolutely thought that the Looney Tunes were the Looney Tunes until I watched a video on the phenomena last year, and now I'm straight up convinced that I'm living in the wrong universe, as it is clearly Looney Tunes. They're cartoons. This new world doesn't make any sense. Some people out there are also adamant that Nelson Mandela died in prison in the late 1980s, which is more than just a slightly altered timeline. It's not just spellings here, this is a pretty major parallel universe event. Coming in at number 7, we have deja vu. Deja vu, a glitch in the Matrix, or a signal from a parallel universe. While both seem as likely as one another, it is thought by some that the weird moments where we feel like we've been or experienced something before are actually signals that something key is happening in our parallel lives. Not only do some people believe parallel universes exist side by side, some people think they interact with one another in some way. According to Dr. Michio Kaku, an American futurist, deja vu occurs as a result of a person's ability to flip between universes. Others believe it is because we're vibrating in unison with the frequency of another universe that's parallel with our very own. Oh, I've gone cross-eyed. Coming in at number 6, we have the Lost Beatles album. A parallel universe may have given our world a gift in the form of a Lost Beatles album, Everyday Chemistry. This story goes that in 2009, a man called James Richards found himself accidentally in a parallel universe, as you do. Luckily, there was also a person from another parallel universe there, a man named Jonas. Now, Jonas was on a trans-dimensional tourism trip from the other Earth, and he told Richards that in his world, amongst other things, John Lennon was still alive and the Beatles never broke up. Richards then stole a copy of a later album never released by the band and returned with it to our Earth. What did he do with one of the most sought after pieces of music from a non-history that almost but never happened here? He uploaded it to the internet. Eagle-eared fans were absolutely having none of it though. They said the album is comprised of clever mashups from all of the Beatles' solo careers. Richards later said that even though in an alternate universe the Beatles hadn't broke up, that didn't mean their future music ideas disappeared. I'm not so sure about this one, but I would love to hear what Paul McCartney has to say about it. Paul, tell us, is it real? I guess you're living in another universe so you don't know, but I don't know. I feel like you'd be able to answer. Coming in at number 5, we have dreams. Could our dreams be signals from a parallel universe? Some say maybe. In a number of First Nations cultures in North and Central America, people believe that dreams allow us to walk planes in other dimensions. Their reasoning is that dreams take place in color and can include all of their senses. They think that when you're in a dream, you are in another world, perhaps a world you already exist in. If you're doing something strange in your dream, maybe it's a sign that actually you live a far stranger life somewhere else. Coming in at number 4, we have the bruise. Anyone else here bruised like a peach? Just me? Me? And the universe. In 2010, along with a team of researchers, Stephen Feeney of the University College in London announced that he had discovered patterns in the radiation background background left over from the Big Bang. Now this seemed to suggest that our universe bumped into not one, not two, but 4 other universes and was left bruised. Okay, what is the plural of universes? Universi? Universi? Universi. Also, from the bruising, further researchers in California think that it is clear that this leads to some kind of like bubble universe theory, which maybe I can get on board with. Maybe Men in Black got it right when they imagined us all as marbles in a big bag. Coming into number 3, we have the cold spot. In 2004, astronomers found something that baffled them, an unusually cold area of space. The area is 1.8 billion light years across and much colder than its surroundings. The area also contained 10,000 less galaxies than in other areas of a similar size studied in space. A researcher from Durham University in the UK believed that the spot could be evidence of a multiverse. They said it seemed as if a parallel universe smashed into ours, affecting it like a car pile-up on the motorway would, only they're calling it a cosmic shunt. They believed the impact was so vast it pushed energy out from a big region of space, therefore creating the cold spot. It's hard to get your head around, but that is what they think. Coming in at number 2, we have City in the Sky. In October 2015, Chinese TV went wild when thousands of residents in 2 areas of the country reported seeing a huge floating city in the clouds. Puzzled onlookers saw skyscrapers in the clouds and believed that they were seeing a ghost city or the colliding of our reality with a parallel universe. The phenomenon occurred in both Guangdong and Jiangxi, with some believing it was the beginning of an alien invasion. The images were caught on camera for the world to see and promptly went viral across the rest of the globe. So what on Earth or above Earth is going on? Well, even though it looks like a city in the clouds to you and me, apparently it is an optical illusion called Fata Morgana, which is the natural mirage. So that is what a lot of scientists are saying anyway, but other people are convinced it's a sign of a parallel universe or even a window to another world. Finally, coming into number 1, we have black holes. The theory of loop quantum gravity suggests that there is no point of singularity in a black hole, rather they're simply folds in the universe. Everything we know about quantum physics tells us that information is never lost, that energy can't be created or destroyed, so perhaps black holes don't suck and destroy, maybe they suck and create. A lot of scientists are dabbling with the idea that black holes are indeed folds or portals to an older part of the universe. Professor Stephen Hawking gave a lecture in 2015 wherein he discussed how it may be possible to come out of the other side of a black hole. He said the hole would need to be large, and if it was rotating, it might have a passage to another universe, but you couldn't come back to our universe. Anyone want to take that one-way trip? I don't know if I do.
Starting off this countdown, we have deja vu. We all know what deja vu is. I'm getting deja vu right now talking about it because I've done a video on deja vu before. But basically it's the feeling that something has already happened before, and scientists have struggled to explain what causes it. Well, there's a theory out there that deja vu occurs when different universes are in sync for a short period of time. For example, maybe you're in the bathroom and you grab your toothbrush. In another universe at the same time, maybe that version of yourself grabbed a hairbrush. Or in one universe you pour a glass of wine, in another you pour yourself a glass of champagne. Those things are happening at the same time, just with small differences. But you're in sync for that moment, and that's why you think to yourself, oh hey, I've done this before. Because in another universe, you just actually did. It's a crazy theory, but many believe it's true. I mean, for all we know, it is true. It's just hard to prove these things. Moving on at number 9, we have the dreams, and if you guys are liking this so far, then smash that like button because it really helps me out and I appreciate it, and you're the best. Some scientists believe that dreams are actually glimpses into a parallel universe. By dreaming, you are seeing what yourself in another universe is doing. 1,000 years ago, mystics believed that dreams are what are happening in a parallel universe. But they also believed that this universe was home to ghosts and spirits. Well, over the years, scientists have agreed with this theory, minus all the ghost and spirit stuff. Well, this could explain why some people have had vivid dreams of places that they have never visited. Maybe that's because their other self was currently there visiting it. Or when you see something in your dream and then the next day it happens in real life. That has happened to me on a number of occasions. Either you're psychic or you got an insight into another universe when you were dreaming, and that's how you knew it was going to occur. Now, there is no way to prove this, but there's also no way to disprove this. In our 8th spot today, we have the Flintstones. Who loves this classic cartoon? That and the Jetsons were pretty iconic. Smash that like button if you agree. Now, the Flintstones are pronounced as so you would think it would be spelt as so. No, apparently it's the Flint Stones with the hard T. I refuse to believe this. Now, you may be thinking, Lindsay, what's the big deal? Well, this is an example of the Mandela effect. I've talked about this before a lot. Basically, it's when a bunch of people remember something being a certain way and another group of people remember it being a different way. The Mandela effect, for those of you who don't know, is named off of Nelson Mandela, because people clearly remember him dying in prison in the 80s when he didn't actually pass away until 2013. So theory goes that there are parallel universes out there. In this case, we have the Flintstones universe and the Flintstones universe. Over time, maybe our universes merged, which is why we have the memory of the Flintstones. The show was actually named that, just in another universe. Little things like these are signs that multiple universes are out there. In our 7th spot today, we have the strange space signals. In spring of 2020, NASA legit thought they found concrete evidence of parallel universes. Basically, they detected some odd signals coming from the South Pole. It was so odd that they had no explanation for it besides parallel universes. So basically, they discovered that high energy neutrinos were coming up out of the Earth and headed to the sky. In fact, they found that this energy was coming up from the Earth instead of down from space. Now, this was weird for a number of reasons. The fact it was going up suggests that when the Big Bang occurred, it formed two universes, one that flows forward and the other in reverse, meaning the other universe is traveling back in time while we're moving forward. For them, the Big Bang represents an end, not the beginning. That is mind-blowing. In our 6th spot, we have Star Wars. This is another example of the Mandela effect, and it's going to make you freaking lose your mind. Who here is a Star Wars fan? Smash that like button or comment down below if you are. Well, even if you're not a fan, I'm sure you all have heard or seen that dramatic scene where it's revealed that Luke's father is, spoiler alert, Darth Vader. He goes, "Luke, I am your father." Wrong. Apparently, he never even said that, yet we all remember him saying the line exactly like that. And even huge Star Wars fans agree to this. Well, when you watch the scene, Luke says, "He told me you killed him," in regards to Obi-Wan telling him that Darth Vader killed his dad. Then Darth Vader replies with, "No, I am your father." So he never even says Luke, it's just no. What the actual heck? So again, people believe that this is a sign that we switched universes. In the other universe, the movie had Darth Vader say the line, "Luke, I am your father." In this universe, he did not. Mad at that one. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the black holes. This next theory was created by Stephen Hawking, and that dude was a freaking genius. So if he believes that black holes are a signal from a parallel universe, then maybe I do too. So in 2016, Stephen Hawking created a study in which he proposed that black holes actually lead to another universe. Instead of destroying everything that goes near them, it just transports you into another universe. Previously, it was said that anything that gets sucked into the hole will be destroyed and lost forever. But in this case, they would just travel through and pop out into another universe. Maybe that's why scientists are starting to discover weird space objects that look unlike anything from our universe. It's because they're coming from a different universe. Maybe Stephen Hawking is onto something, and black holes are actually portals. In our 4th spot, we have the simulation. In 2018, researchers ran a massive computer simulation that involved building a new universe under a variety of different conditions, and they discovered that universes could still be created even with less dark energy as ours. Study co-author Pascal Elahi said, and I quote, "Even in universes with 300 times as much dark energy as ours, life found a way. Our simulation showed that the accelerated expansion driven by dark energy has hardly any impact on the birth of stars, and hence places for life to arise." Meaning, other planets can exist in other universes, even if that universe was being torn apart by dark energy. He continued on saying, and I quote, "Even increasing dark energy many hundreds of times might not be enough to make a dead universe." They then went on to believe that aliens are living on planets in other universes. The reason we haven't found them yet is because they are in other universes, not ours. In our 3rd spot, we have the pattern. A number of astronomers started picking up a weird signal coming from the sky. Basically, the signal will chime for 4 days, then after the 4th day, day, it'll stop. It will then stop for 12 days before picking up again and doing the same thing over and over again. It's thought that maybe on the days where it's not sending a signal towards us, it's actually sending a signal in another direction or to another universe. Some believe that this is coming from aliens or other life forms, or from people in another universe. If not, what else could it be? The signal is very consistent and they still don't have an explanation for it. In our second spot, we have the silence of the lambs. Here's another Mandela effect example that will make you lose your mind. Okay. All of you have better seen the movie Silence of the Lambs. If you haven't, you're not a true horror fan. Anyways, for some reason, we all remember Hannibal Lecter going, "Hello, Clarice." You know, that was my Anthony Hopkins impression. Pretty good one. And he says it in a really freaking scary way. But apparently, he never said that in the movie. He only has said good morning during their first meeting. This is not okay. I literally can picture him saying it right now. So here's another sign that there are multiple universes. There's a universe where Anthony Hopkins does "Hello, Clarice," and one where he doesn't. And in our number one spot today, we have the cosmic bruise. In 2017, cosmologists discovered a weird cold spot in the universe. After studying it, a number of people believe that this cold spot is a bruise that was left after our universe collided with another universe. Professor Tom Shanks in Durham University's Center for Extragalactic Astronomy said, and I quote, "One explanation for the cold spot is that it might be the remnant signal of the collision of our universe and one of the trillions of others." In fact, the team found 4 bruises, meaning that our universe has collided several other times in the past, meaning there has to be multiple universes out there.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have 2 phones. This story had my mind absolutely blown, but when I looked at the replies, it was brought to a whole new level. This story reads, quote, "Okay, I know this sounds a bit crazy. So to start off my story, my mom and dad are divorced and my dad just came to pick me up. But yesterday my mom got an infection somewhere in her lower abdomen. While my dad was driving to his house, my dad started to call my mom and she picked up. But they couldn't hear each other. So my dad hung up, but then like 20 seconds later we both got a call at the same time, but by 2 different numbers. We both answered and on the other line was my mom. We started talking and she sounded the same, but like I said, they were 2 different numbers and me and my dad are just sitting there looking at each other like, are we losing our minds? We started to talk to, quote, my mom, and she was saying 2 different things while we were both talking to her. And now I don't know if I'm losing my mind or what." Okay, so I was like, that story is really strange and I don't really have an explanation for what could have happened there. Then I look at the replies because you know who always has explanations? Redditors. And one user replied with their theory that this was a case of a temporary reality slip or merge. Like, what in the world is that? My mind is blown. In our number 9 spot today, we have the nap. This wild story took place in 2022 and it starts off with the storyteller explaining that in that year, they took a nap and woke up in 2014. When they woke up, they were on the couch at their old job in their old uniform on a break. They knew something was wrong and that they were back in time, but to make matters weirder, they were like their 2020 self and what they look like currently, but they were in the year 2014, if that makes sense. From here they wrote, quote, "I looked around and ran down the hallway when my manager stopped me and asked me what was wrong. I asked him what year it was and he said 2014. I insisted to him it was 2020. I ran up the stairs and everyone was looking at me. Everyone was acting like I worked there the last 6 years and nothing changed. Everyone asked me what was wrong. Then they head to the apartment that they lived in 2014 and it looked exactly the same and their parents were there who also confirmed that the year was 2014 and also began asking what was wrong and what was going on. This is when the story takes the craziest turn though. They open their bedroom door and their ex is lying in their bed, but this ex is also the current 2020 version of themselves, not the 2014 version, and they too have this awareness that they're back in time. They then went on to write, quote, "They told me they," meaning the ex, "brought me back. They were fully aware of what was happening. After talking for what felt like days in our old apartment, they left, and I went back to sleep in my own bed and woke up back in 2020 in my bed. I truly can't explain what on earth happened here, but it definitely is unbelievable." In our number 8 spot today, we have Parallel You. This strange story starts out with the storyteller setting the scene for us. They wrote, quote, "This happened about 5 years ago when I lived with my parents. It was about 5 minutes after 8 a.m. and I had woken up, went downstairs and sat in the recliner. Dad was sleeping on the couch and mom was in the kitchen cooking breakfast, biscuits and gravy. Everything was normal. Okay, this sounds like a great time so far, but just wait. They then explained that they moved from the recliner to the dining room, and then boom, suddenly they're at their friend Paul's house like they've been there the whole time. There are a couple other people there, and someone who's underneath a jacked up car working on it. This is when they write, quote, "The guy underneath the car asked me to hand him the new muffler that was laying right beside where I was standing. I picked it up, I remember it had some weight to it, I recall the heat of the sun hitting me in the face, it was about 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I knelt down to give him the muffler and the weight being lifted off when I handed it to him. It was just all so vivid." So now, when the storyteller went to stand back up, they heard this sound that was similar to the splash sound that occurs when somebody jumps into a pool. Immediately the sound then went into reverse, and then there was a loud clap sound, and now they're back in their dining room. They go on to write, quote, "I looked around, looked at the clock, and it was only 8:12. Dad was still on the couch, Mom was still cooking breakfast, and I went into the kitchen to ask her what that loud clap was. She gave me a puzzled look and said, 'What clap?' I covered it up by saying it must have been on TV, and I sat back down trying to process what had just happened, knowing if I tried to tell her what happened that she might think I'm crazy. So I dropped it and moved on with my day as normal. I have never had anything like this happen before or since." They finish off their post by saying that they think they might have transported temporarily to their body in an alternate reality, and to be completely honest, I have no other ideas of what could have gone on here. In our number 7 spot today we have Who Was That? Okay, I'm gonna need your opinion on this one and what you guys think is going on here, because this one has me a bit confused. So this post says, quote, "This happened about 2 years ago. So my fiance and I were lying down in the living room, his face is facing towards me and my face is towards him. My face is looking towards the wall behind him and his face is towards the living room space. On the verge of waking up, my mom walks from the kitchen to her bedroom, in which you have to pass the living room in between. She asks, 'Are you both okay?' asking from her bedroom. Not thinking much, my fiance and I both answer, 'Yes.' In that moment, I got confused because I remember my mom telling me earlier in the morning that she was heading to town and she wouldn't be back until the afternoon. I get up from the couch, go to check her bedroom, and there is no sight of my mom anywhere. I told my mom about this and she confirmed that she had been in town from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. My fiance and I still talk about this to this day, and we are still freaked out about this." So my first thought was obviously a dream, but the fact that they both experienced it is the thing I can't get past. So what do you think happened here? Some sort of shared dream experience, something to do with parallel universes, some weird ghost thing? At this point, I have no idea. In our number 6 spot today, we have the train to nowhere. It doesn't matter what train you're on, where it is, or whether it's underground or above ground, when the doors close, everything is lawless. I feel like trains are always the portal to another world, and this story only proves my theory. This story reads, quote, "3 years ago I was riding a train, got my ticket checked and took my seat. A few stops later, someone else turned up and seemed to have booked the exact same seat to the same destination. The same train conductor that checked my ticket earlier came, we compared our tickets, and it turned out I was booked on a non-existent train number with the same destination and time, but strangely enough, I had the same name as the one I shared a seat number with. Tried to check up on the number from my ticket afterwards and didn't get any hits for my actual train number." This is fully some platform 9 3/4 stuff that I cannot understand. In our number 5 spot today, we have Am I Really Here? Okay, this Reddit story starts off with the OP explaining that on February 20th, 2022, they dreamed that they were in a car accident. They then go into extremely vivid detail of the scenario that led up to the accident itself, and then the aftermath of it, and they could so viscerally feel all of the things as they were happening. Their car ended up in water and they found themselves unable to escape, and they explained the thoughts that flashed through their mind of their family. Their phone was nearby and they managed to call their girlfriend, who didn't answer, and they left one last voicemail. It's all very detailed and horrifyingly sad, and they end it by writing, quote, "I remember crying to myself, trying to think of something else I could do to get out of this, to survive, but the water kept rising, and in the end I simply stared up through it at the faint flashing light at the surface, blue and red. I prayed until my vision went black and I couldn't fight to hold my breath any longer. And then I woke up, alone in bed, freezing with a cold sweat, but awake and confused. I don't know how or why I'm here, because I died. I felt my body die. I felt the water enter my lungs and the pain that it caused. I felt it all. I shouldn't be here. So this person thinks that they passed away in one reality and jumped into this one where that was all just a terrible nightmare. That is horrifying. That would be the most terrifying experience ever. Was this just a very vivid nightmare or an example of someone who jumped universes? In our number 4 spot today we have the real me. Okay, this story is a bit of a longer one, but it's so worth it, I swear. It reads, quote, "I was shopping at a thrift store in a small town I lived in several years ago. I was looking around and happened to be near the checkout counter. An old lady came out from the back and said, 'Are you?' said my name. I said yes, figuring I'd worked with her or something in the past, although she didn't look familiar to me. My name is not super common anymore, although I do see it on personalized items on a very infrequent basis. She was really excited to see me. She asked if I was still working at a certain school in a neighboring town about a half-hour away. I was confused and told her I'd never worked at a school in that town or any town. She appeared confused and stated that we had worked at the school together for a long time. I politely said that she must have me confused with someone else. She seemed like she was kind of scared at that point and again asked if my name was what she had stated before. I said yes, and she said, 'Well, you look just like her.' We chatted a bit about this other person and I asked what this other person's last name was and gave mine. She said she didn't remember, but she could have sworn that I was her. We laughed about it and I finished my shopping and left. I didn't think much about this till a few weeks later when I was walking down a street near my house. A woman, not the one from the thrift shop, came out of her house, saw me, and asked if my name was, said my name. I said yes. She also became excited and asked if I was still working at the school in the nearby town. I again explained that she must have me confused with someone else. She also said that I looked just like this other person with the same name, and she also didn't know the other woman's last name. This actually did creep me out. I've been mistaken for other people before, but not twice in the same month for a person who looks like me and has the same name with the same spelling. I think it is possible another reality crossed briefly with this one and this was the result. No one has mistaken me for this woman since. You guys, imagine how strange that would be. I swear I wouldn't go anywhere ever again. In our number 3 spot today we have the memories. Okay, this story starts off on June 16th, 2015. Our storyteller was really into visiting the skate park at this time and was on an out-of-town trip with their mom and ended up visiting a skate park while on this trip. While at the park they unfortunately ended up getting in an accident that led to them being unconscious for a few minutes and having a few minor injuries such as broken ribs. It definitely could have been worse and they were lucky to walk away from the accident, but during their time unconscious they experienced something that they refer to as the 7 minutes. During this period they explained that their life flashed before their eyes and that they went through basically all of their memories and then it was black. When they woke up after some time they began to realize that while everyone looks the same, no one shares any of the same memories that they now have. The ones they saw during the 7 minutes. They have also stated that they now have this ability to feel when a family member dies, and as an example, they explained that they told their mother of their grandfather's death 20 minutes before she got the call. I think that would have been a really weird conversation, but once the phone call came, it was likely quite eerie. In our number 2 spot today we have a bike ride to another universe. This is a story that I have no explanation as to what could have happened, but when I first read it, it gave me that shivery kind of feeling. It was posted on Reddit and they wrote, quote, "I was 11, maybe 12. We lived on this large piece of land in the desert with a truck repair shop on it. Most of the time we'd hear the mechanic tinkering away in the shop or our neighbor would be sitting out on his step. In the summer of 2013 I rode my bike out to the back of the property. There was a big hole with sheet metal covering it and I liked to ride my bike across because it would make an awesome thunder-like noise. I had done it hundreds of times, but this time it was different. I rode across and when my bike tires touched the dirt, I immediately felt different. Everything felt too silent. Everything felt static, like it was frozen. Like if I tried to move anything, it wouldn't move. I was honestly too nervous to ride back to my house. I felt like I would show up and everyone would be gone. Just missing. No people, no animals. I took a 15-minute break and just pedaled back. I always think about this. Maybe the vibration from the sheet metal was enough to create some sort of disturbance. Maybe being off in the back of the property by myself, but I loved doing that because nobody bothered me while I rode my bike. I never had any other experiences like that, and every time I went back to that part of the property, I would take my dog with me on a leash so I wouldn't be all alone." What do you guys think happened here? In our number 1 spot today, we have breakfast in a parallel universe. Breakfast at Tiffany's or breakfast in a parallel universe, this Reddit story honestly could be the plot of a movie. The Redditor wrote, quote, "My husband and I bought a country house, a place that we go to and work on most weekends. It's in a small town in Texas. One weekend we happened upon a restaurant that we had never noticed before. We entered and I remembered an older man, another customer with a cowboy hat on, said, 'You can just seat yourselves.' So we made our way to a little table that was open in the middle of the busy restaurant. We ordered breakfast, ate, and left. Everything seemed normal. 1 or 2 weeks later, we tried to find the same restaurant and never could find it. We drove all around the town and on each of the roads out of town and never found it. The building where I could have sworn it was boarded up and abandoned. The building looked the same but long deserted." I feel like this could either be like a cool drama or an awesome eerie thriller, you know? But either way, this story would have had me extremely confused and questioning a lot of things. It's crazy to me that they both experienced the same thing because it takes away a ton of other possible explanations. Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have the close call. This story comes from a guy who loves cars but had a weird moment about 15 years ago that he just couldn't get off of his mind. When he was in his early 20s, he loved to speed in cars and just wanted to go fast. His friend had a car that he really wanted to drive, and one day it just turned out to be his lucky day and his friend finally gave in. He hopped in the driver's seat with his friend who owned the car in the passenger seat and another buddy in the back, and off they went. They went to an empty freeway around 3 a.m. and put the pedal to the metal. Once they hit around 135 miles per hour, they began to see a bunch of semi-trucks. There were 3 basically driving side by side, taking up all 3 of the lanes and certainly not going as fast as our speed demon friend. He thought to himself that there was an on-ramp coming up and he would just use that as some extra room to pass, but unfortunately as he approached the on-ramp, another semi was entering the freeway and occupying that 4th lane. With all 4 semis lined up, he was approaching too fast with no time to brake, so he closed his eyes and prepared for the worst. But then, nothing happened. He opened his eyes and the other guys in the car were just as confused as he was. Somehow they were now in front of all of the semis, but there was literally no room for them to have passed by them. This was the end of his speeding career as he was super spooked as to what possibly just happened. Was this a real world glitch, or did he somehow enter a reality where he wasn't in an extremely dangerous and potentially fatal situation? In our number 9 spot today, we have the strange storm. This story goes that a couple were at home just doing some household chores when something super strange happened to them. The husband went to open the front door to toss a dirty rug out of the house, and it was just completely pitch black outside. The weird part is that it was at 2 p.m. and from inside the house it looked like a regular sunny afternoon with light coming in from the windows. They said that suddenly outside the front door where it was dark, it's like the sun was a light bulb and it just went on, then off again, and then on. They described it like the flickering a light bulb does right before it's burnt out. The wife asked her husband if he had seen that and he replied, "Yes, what just happened?" They also said there weren't any clouds out either, so it couldn't have been a cloud blocking the sun. Were they transported to some alternate reality for a second? I honestly have no explanation for what the pair witnessed. In our number 8 spot today, we have the disappearing town. This story comes from a person who often commutes to a town around 3 hours away from the one that they live in. One day they were doing the 3-hour drive with their mom and they got to the part that takes about 1/3 of the entire drive, and it's an area that just has a lot of like mountains and cliffs and nature. So the person telling the story is in the passenger seat and their mom is driving, and as they look out the side of the window over one of the cliffs, they see a small community that they had never seen before. The community looked nice and it consisted of mostly bungalows, which is apparently not normal for the area. Both them and their mom were super confused as to how they had never seen this community before, but it gets even weirder. They never saw the community again. It just disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Did they accidentally drive into another dimension one day? In our number 7 spot today, we have slightly different. One morning in 2008, a woman named Lorena woke up in a life that was similar to the one she was living in when she went to sleep, but certainly not the same. At first, it was just things like her bed sheets and pajamas, but when she got to work, things began to escalate. Lorena realized that her office wasn't her office and that she worked in the same building, but in a completely different department. She had never even met her boss before, so she knew this couldn't have just been a moment where she got lost or confused. When she returned home after the workday, she was met by her ex-boyfriend, only to find out that he was apparently her current boyfriend. She tried to find the person that she had been dating for months, but he didn't seem to exist in this new life and world that she now found herself in. Lorena began to seek psychiatric help because she was fearing she was having some sort of nervous breakdown, but all the tests revealed that she seemed to be of sound body and mind. The strange occurrences continued when Lorena asked her family how her sister was doing. Lorena knew that her sister had recently had shoulder surgery and she wanted to check in, but when she asked her family, they were baffled by her claims and insisted that there was no surgery that had taken place on anyone in the family. Lorena couldn't find any answers to her situation and was having no luck with a medical explanation either. She is convinced that she went to sleep one night and woke up in a parallel universe that was altered slightly by small decisions that she had made. Honestly, after all of these stories, I think I kinda might believe her too. In our number 6 spot today, we have moving. So this story comes from Reddit, and it starts off one day when a guy gets a call from his neighbors asking him if he can help them move a mattress upstairs. They had a good relationship with the neighbors, so of course he was willing to help. When he got there, they got the mattress all moved, and the neighbors asked if he wouldn't mind helping with an armoire as well. No problem, he thought, as he began to help them move that one up the stairs as well. This is when things went awry, however. There were 11 stairs at the front, he was on the lower end carrying the armoire, and about 6 steps up his friend at the top lost a handle on it, and the whole thing came crashing down on him since he was of course at the bottom. He loses his balance and falls backwards towards the pavement, and this man actually remembers dying from this fall. The next thing he remembers though is waking up in his dining room with his phone ringing and his wife asking him if he's going to answer the phone. He is obviously super freaked out because he literally just remembers dying 2 seconds ago, but now he's here? When he answers the phone, it's his neighbor asking if he can help move a mattress up the stairs. He surprisingly goes over again to help, and when he gets there he says he can help with the mattress but not with the armoire. This neighbor is shocked because he doesn't know how he could have possibly known about the armoire. Did the guy have some sort of premonition, or did his death in one reality bring him into a different one? Who knows, but I hope he's taking advantage of this second lease on life. In our number 5 spot today, we have the breath. This Reddit post comes from the user cat22l, and they wrote, quote, "About 30 seconds ago I was sitting on the couch as my dog walked by to go sit on her bed we have behind the L part of the sectional. She had something small caught in her throat last night, I think a popcorn shell, so I was paying attention to her breathing just to make sure she got it out. For a few minutes she was breathing fine, and then what sounded like a light snore started happening. This is semi-normal for her depending on what position she's laying in, so I didn't bother to go over and check on her. That went on for about 5 minutes until the most disgusting, and to my now realization terrifying, snore/cough/wheezing sounds started happening. I go over to her to make sure she's okay, and the exact moment I looked at her bed, the sound stopped mid-breath and she wasn't there. She was outside with my parents and had been for around 30 minutes. There's no way to get out of the room without walking right past me. I don't know whose dog I saw and what was making that creepy ass sound 5 feet away from me, but I'm going to be staying outside for the rest of the day and hiring an exorcist. Maybe this is a weird parallel universe story, or maybe this is just a full-on demon. What do you guys think? In our number 4 spot today, we have the road trip. One day in 2006, a woman named Carol was driving through San Bernardino, California on her way to Paris, California, where she was going to stay for a few days. On her travels, she saw a sign for Riverside, which was nearby, and she decided that since her family had roots there, maybe it was time to stop in for a visit. As she went into Riverside, she realized that everything looked different from how she remembered it, and she was unable to find her old house that she grew up in. She tried to go to the street that her grandmother used to live on, but that one was different too. And when she tried to visit her grandparents' graves at the cemetery, the whole place didn't even exist. Even the people who were living in the town gave Carol a bad feeling, and she didn't even want to get out of her car. She decided she would be better off just continuing on her trip, and she left Riverside. Carol didn't return to Riverside until a few years later after her dad had passed away and she was attending the funeral. To Carol's surprise, when she went to Riverside this time, everything was as she remembered it from her childhood. Carol believes that somehow that day she ended up in some sort of a parallel universe form of Riverside, and she even said that she felt like if she left her car that day, she was going to get stuck there. In our number 3 spot today, we have the new location. So one day this person was driving to work on the same route that they took every single day. They worked the whole day through and got into their car to head back home on the same path. As they're driving, they start feeling super anxious and like on the verge of a panic attack. They keep driving and then they suddenly see this huge power plant all lit up. They're super confused because they drive this road every single day. How could they miss this glaringly obvious thing? Then their boyfriend calls and asks them to pick up McDonald's on the way home. No problem, they go through the drive-thru. When they get to the window, they see an employee they've never seen before, even though they are at this same McDonald's almost every single day, and this new employee is the only one there, and they say that they've been working there for around 2 months. They take the food and head home, and when they get there, they begin to tell the boyfriend about this strange power plant that they saw. Their boyfriend explains that it's always been there, so he doesn't know what they're talking about. Now every day they drive past this power plant with no idea how it got there or how they had missed it, but they've also noticed a few other small differences in their life. Their dog doesn't know the tricks it used to know, or how their boyfriend pronounces some words differently from before. Maybe they slipped into a new dimension on their drive home from work that day. In our number 2 spot today, we have Honey. This story starts off with a woman who we'll call Anna having her bi-weekly phone call with her mom just to catch up and see what's going on. Anna's mom unfortunately had to inform her that Anna's sister's dog named Honey had passed away. Anna was obviously super upset at this loss and called her sister to check in after hearing the news. Anna asked tons of questions about where they were planning to bury her, as well as asking how her sister's son was doing with the loss. Anna told her boyfriend how upset she was about the loss of the dog, as they had really had a bond. Flash forward a couple of months and Anna is heading home for Thanksgiving. Her sister was heading out of town to spend the holiday with her in-laws, so she left her pets at the parents' house so that they could be watched over. As Anna walks into her parents' home, she sees Honey, healthy as can be, sitting in the living room. Anna was of course overjoyed, but asked her mom why she had told her that Honey died. Anna's mom was very confused and said that that conversation never happened. After leaving her parents, Anna asked her boyfriend and he said he was super glad that she brought it up because he also remembered this conversation. Did they somehow enter a world where Honey was still alive? While this would be such an amazing surprise, it would also be unbelievably creepy. In our number 1 spot today, we have the crosswalk. Okay, maybe a parallel universe story, maybe a glitch in the Matrix story. Either way, when I came across this one on Reddit, it actually gave me goosebumps because it was just so strange. So let me set the stage for you. The original poster of this story, for a few weeks prior to this incident, had been noticing this sort of mundane thing that he found that many people did. The thing was how pedestrians will wait at a crosswalk until the walk sign comes on, and when it does, he was finding that people will usually pull their cell phones out of their pocket and look at them as they walk across the street. Nothing too strange there, it was just a thing that he had noticed. So flash forward to this specific incident, this guy is driving with his daughter. He goes on to write, quote, "We stopped at a red light at a crossing and there was a man standing there. Nothing out of the ordinary, denim jacket, black cap, glasses, around 6'2". I thought I'd try to weird out my young daughter. She's 5, so I knew this was going to blow her damn mind. So I said, see that man? When the walking man goes green and he starts to walk across, he'll reach into his pocket and pull out his phone and start looking at it. Watch and see. As he walks across, he reaches into his pocket, but then immediately takes his hand out and looks and points right at me with his mouth open, smiling like a gotcha stance. Of course, my daughter found this absolutely hilarious, and I sat there completely mind blown. I must have sat there in silence looking at him walk across for the next 10 seconds. I drove on and had a look at him as I drove past, and he was smirking and laughing. Of course, I'm thinking that he must have heard this guy somehow, but the poster goes on to say that the windows were up, the radio was on, his voice was at a completely normal volume, and this crosswalk guy would have been like 15 to 20 feet away. He finishes the post by saying, quote, "I can't figure out at all how he could have heard me. It's literally impossible. How did he know I was trying to predict he'd reach into his pocket for his phone? The only even remote possibility I can think of is that he has had the same observation as me and thought I might be thinking the same thing, so he just went for it. But realistically, what are even the chances of this?"
This story truly is just an incredibly weird one.
At number 10 we have I flew in from Torrid. Going to another universe sounds good, but you have no idea what's going to be on the other side. Maybe it's going to be really simple. Maybe it's a universe where everything is the same but everyone's left-handed. Or maybe it's a reality where the Nazis won the war and O.J. Simpson leads a fighting force in America against the Nazi forces. Well, the man from Torrid probably wished he stayed back in his universe. It was 1954 and a plane just landed in Tokyo. Everyone was getting off and everything seemed normal. But then one dude halted everything. Custom officials ran out and started investigating this one guy. He had all his documents, but he was from a country that didn't exist. It was a place called Torrid. The man in question said that it was a very real place and that he had flown from Torrid to Japan many times. At first glance, this guy seemed to be a whack job, but then the crazy thing was that all his paperwork was legitimate. He had official stamps on his passport to back all of his stories and claimed that the country of Torrid was squeezed right in between France and Spain. The custom officials in Japan were stumped, and I understand why. There isn't anything in the training manual about how to deal with interdimensional travel. So they escorted him to a hotel and he was not allowed to leave until the problem was sorted out. 2 guards stood outside of his door and he was on the 15th floor, so there was no way for him to sneak out of the building. In the morning the guards went in to take him out for more questioning and the dude was gone. He disappeared like a fart in the wind, and that was the end of the story. I guess he didn't like how strict we were in our dimension. At number 9 we have the Beatles ain't dead. These were the claims of James Richard after he took a trip down Abbey Road and ended up in a parallel universe where the Beatles were still kicking. To start off, I have to say that James Richard is not this guy's real name. He uses a fake name so the powers that be won't find him. But his story goes like this. He says that him and his dog were going for a stroll through the Del Puerto Canyon in California, and then out of nowhere he fell through a hole in space and time. He woke up in another version of Earth. He was in a hospital bed and there was a man named Jonas sitting next to him in the bed. And then Jonas started to give him the rundown on interdimensional travel. Through their discussions they started to talk about music, and it turns out that Richards was in an alternate version of Earth where the Beatles were still alive and cranking out tunes. James Richard even brought back a cassette tape with the music of this living Beatles band. The cassette was called Everyday Chemistry, and it sounds like he just spliced together some Beatles songs and some Wings songs, but who knows, maybe this is what the Beatles would have sounded like if 2 of their members never died. At number 8 we have the Dobbses. Frank and Althea Dobbs were the leading minds in a new scientific practice called chaos science. It's the idea that consciousness could possibly be its own universe. They started to pick up some steam and some other people decided to join their cause. They moved the team to a ghost town of Ong's Hat, New Jersey. Here they started to do research on interdimensional travel. I have to say this does sound like a cult. Well, cult or not, they claim that they have succeeded in this practice. It's said that they found a wormhole which led them to a parallel version of Earth that never had been consumed by humans, and they chose to stay there. Considering the state of the planet right now, I would say this was a very good choice. At number 7 we have Whose Life Is This? You go to sleep a happy lady and then you wake up and you're back with your ex-boyfriend? This sounds like a bender that you wish didn't happen, but for Lorena Garcia, this wasn't that at all. She woke up in her bed and she noticed a bunch of minor details were off. The setup of her room was a little off and her sheets weren't the ones that she loved. Never mess with a lady's sheets. Then her ex-boyfriend walked into the room, but the crazy thing is, it wasn't her ex. They never broke up and they were still together. After this she was like, okay, this is crazy, but I gotta go to work. So she went into her job and she had a different job and a different boss who was someone she had never seen before, and she couldn't explain any of this. At number 6 we have Riverside Down. I don't know how you can go through an interdimensional portal without noticing it, but apparently this happens quite a bit. Carol Chase McElhenney was driving through Cali when she decided to take a short trip to her hometown of Riverside to see how things never really change. It can always be a little bit of a shock to go back to where you grew up, but this time things had changed a lot. Actually, everything had changed. The layout of the town was the same, but all the houses were different. The home she grew up in was warped. She was concerned that she had taken a wrong turn, but she found her old school which she went to, which was exactly where it should be. But then she started noticing strange figures around the town, people who looked a little off and definitely creepy. This was enough for her, and then she sped out of there. She returned to this town at a later date and everything was back to normal, but she never forgot that time she slipped into a parallel dimension. At number 5 we have Interdimensional Cabin. No, this isn't another movie pitch from me, although this would have been an amazing movie pitch. There's a cabin in the Markawasi Stone Forest that is said to open up a door to a different time. Some women were hiking hiking through the woods and they saw some people outside this cabin dancing and lighting torches. Before you run away in fear, they weren't lighting torches to get all angry mob, but it was because they didn't have any sort of modern technology. They were all dressed in clothes that looked like they were pulled out of the Spanish Golden Age. The people dancing eventually entered the cabin and the women went to investigate. One of the women walked halfway into the cabin and her friend grabbed her and pulled her out. She immediately fell to the ground and couldn't move half of her body. Half of her body was paralyzed. The women ran away, and some people speculate that the reason the woman couldn't move half of her body after she entered the cabin is because she entered another dimension halfway and then was pulled out, which caused her body to get all screwed up. I don't really know if there's good science on this. At number 4, we have what road is this? The crazy thing about all these stories is how calm people are when they get transported to another world. Pedro Olivia Ramirez was driving through Spain and was headed to the town of Alcalá de Guadaira. This was a drive he could do on autopilot. He had done it so many times before, but this time something went terribly wrong. He made a usual turn that should have led him down a small road, but he was suddenly on a 6-lane highway. He didn't recognize any of this at all, and everywhere around him there was these buildings that seemed like they were pulled from another world. Eventually he pulled off the highway, and to his surprise he ended up in Alcalá de Guadaira. He tried going back to find this highway, but he never could. See, if that was me, I would be swerving all over the road and then would pass out from a panic attack. At number 3, we have a wrong turn. When you go on a road trip, you probably want to go cross country, not cross dimensions. There were 4 girls driving through a desert in Nevada, and out of nowhere things started to get a little strange. They saw street signs that had an unknown language on them. They didn't have any sort of markings of any alphabet that any of them could recognize. So what's the best course of action when you end up in a strange neighborhood? Well, you ask for directions, you silly little goose. So they saw some dudes hanging out what looked like to be a truck stop diner, and they drove up beside them to ask them where they were. But then things got strange. These guys started to freak out, and it didn't take long for the women to realize that these guys were humanoids, but definitely not human. So they hightailed it out of there. This is when they started to get followed by some oval-shaped vehicles. The girl driving slammed on the gas, and she must have pushed it up to 88 because then they were back in Nevada, and the oval pursuers had vanished. At number 2, we have the Children of Woolpit. This story is bonkers. We're going back to the 12th century. Everyone in the town of Woolpit was chilling and doing a bunch of farm stuff and just trying to survive. You know what it was like back then. Then 2 kids came walking into town. They had green skin and spoke a gibberish language. The people took these kids in because they're kids and they seemed like they were terrified. They fed them, but the kids would only eat beans. Then not long after this, the boy of the 2 died. But the girl lived on. She eventually learned how to speak English and told everyone that she was from another world, somewhere where the sun never rose and it was perpetually twilight. She said she was on her father's farm and heard a crash, and then she was in Woolpit. She never found out where she was from, but she did eventually settle down and start a family. And for the number 1 spot, we have Shadow of a Doubt. Interdimensional travel is apparently impossible because space-time bends matter and light. But because of this bending of light, there is a chance that we could see shadows from another dimension. This could have been what happened to a young woman who was living in Massachusetts. She said one night she saw a shadowy figure appear in her room out of her closet. The figure moved close to her and then was followed by another. And then another. Some of them were wearing strange clothes, and one of them seemed to be wearing glasses. Then they started to surround her, and she did the smart thing and hightailed it out of her room. Of course, you're not going to stick around with the ghost things. There could be the chance that these were some sort of beings peeking in from another dimension.
Coming in number 10, we have the invisible car crash. Now, there are tons of ways to explain real-life glitches. When you see someone lag on camera, that could have just been the recording. When you see a plane stalled in the sky, like we had on our last video, that could be explained through some clever editing. But I don't really know how you fake a car crash like the one I'm about to show you. Yeah, you guys just saw what I just saw, right? That was a car that was crashing into nothing. There was a car that was zooming along the highway, and then it smacked into an invisible barrier. Now, this could have been some pole in the road that was angled so perfectly that the driver and the camera couldn't see it. Now, that is possible, but highly unlikely. How could something that thin and small be strong enough to cause a moving car that's going about 60 kilometers an hour to stop in its tracks? Was there some sort of invisible force field there that was left on by accident? Or could this just be someone spending hours editing something strange to put out as disinformation to make us all very confused? Either way, I would be pissed if I was the owner of that car. You don't do anything wrong, and then something invisible causes your car to be a write-off? Is that even covered under your insurance?
Next, at number 9, disappearing texts. Random user on Reddit shared this experience they had. Their girlfriend was working at a restaurant that night and sent them a text that read, "Hey, I'm picking you up food when I'm done, so don't eat anything, love you." And this message appeared during an emergency broadcast alert and then disappeared right after the alert. This seemed odd, so the person restarted their phone and went to go pick up their girlfriend from the restaurant. When they picked her up, she said they should go somewhere to eat, which threw them off because didn't she just say she was grabbing them food? But she said her phone was off the whole time she was at work. Never sent a text. The author of the story said they saw her turn on her phone as if it was off the whole time, and there was no evidence of a text sent. But the text they received came from the girlfriend's number. So their explanation? It must have been sent from an alternate universe. A parallel one where their girlfriend was going to get them food, and this was just a glitch in the matrix that disappeared once it slipped out. And texts aren't the only thing to slip through the matrix.
Coming in number 8, we have teleporting, time traveling, or NPC. I would imagine that sometime in the future we will lock down teleportation. I don't know if time travel is on the table, but who knows? If we went back 100 years and got someone to eat Korean fried chicken, they might have an overdose from all the flavor. But if people are working on it, you would imagine it would take some time to work out all the kinks. In this next clip, we might be seeing the early stages of people glitching reality so they can teleport. You see that massive truck had to swerve out of the way so that they didn't crash into that lady. Some random woman appeared out of nowhere, and it looks like she has a perfectly clean lab coat on. I mean, I don't know how someone would end up walking around in the middle of the highway miles away from any town, but they usually don't dress like they came right out of the lab. She seems so calm even though she was almost hit by a truck. Usually when a 16-wheeler has to swerve out of the way so it doesn't crash into me, I wet my jeans just a little bit. But she's just strolling like she knew she was going to be safe, or she's a poorly programmed NPC. Next on the list, we have Brady Fiegel squared. There are a lot of people in this world who say they have found their twin. I'm looking at you, David Diggs. If I get tagged in one more picture of you, I'm gonna have to chase you down and take a side-by-side picture so people know we're not the same person. But even though David Diggs and I kinda look the same, we have nowhere close to the same similarities as Brady Fiegel and Brady Fiegel. For one, both these guys have the exact same name. On top of that, they both play professional baseball. On top of that, they are both left-handed pitchers. This seems pretty rare, and you would expect this to be the point where the similarities end. Well, guess what? There's more. For one, they both look almost identical. They both have had the same surgery from the same doctor, and they even dress similar, wearing the same glasses. It would seem that the random person generator that populates this planet with people might have glitched and made two copies of the same dude. People thought that they might have been long lost twins that were separated at birth. A DNA test showed that that wasn't true, but they did have the same German ancestry. Coming in next on the list, we have the cat reflection. I don't know what kind of software is going into making the mirrors in our giant simulation world, but it would seem that this is a place ripe for glitches. Oh, and just so we're clear, I'm not a believer in simulation theory. I just like playing along with the theme for this list. But even though I think that everything can be explained logically, this next clip is a little trippy. The CPU that is in charge of getting everything running must have been putting the computing power somewhere else when this went off. I mean, that would be a good sign to tell if you are an important person if you think simulation theory is real. Like, if this is indeed a simulation, I'm going to play with this idea for a moment, and there are a bunch of glitches around you, that would mean that the universal computing power is being used somewhere else on more important and interesting people. So if you see those glitches, that's your sign to step up your game because your life is boring. Next on the list, we have Mark Zuck is a Matrix program. If there's anyone that could be a lizard person or a robot or an alien or some sort of simulation-based software person that has been put into the world to control us and cause havoc, it would be Mark Zuckerberg. And there have been several moments where people have caught this poor excuse for an alien trying to be a human acting weird. But this one has to be my favorite.
You need to focus and try not to let stuff bother you as much as possible. But it is gonna bother you because you're human, and I was human. I am human, still.
The Zuck was caught red-handed saying that he wasn't a human. That has to be one of the most obvious glitches ever. The programmers would have been like, who's in charge of writing the script for Zuckerberg, and why did you make him act like a robot and make references to not being human because you're blowing our cover big time? I mean, let's say in the next few years there's a massive revolution and we get into a bunch of secret files about which famous people living among us are aliens and which ones are humans. I would be more surprised to find out that this guy is actually fully human. Next on the list, we have the rain spot. I mean, we all hate bad weather, so I think many of us would prefer if we could condense it into one spot and have everything else nice all the time. Well, I guess there must have been a trial run for some new rain patches, because that's what we got here. It would seem that for some reason the clouds in that area have glitched out and the rain is pouring down in only one spot. I've never seen anything like that before in my life. Now that has to be some sort of glitch or the plot to a children's book called The Loneliest Rain Cloud. A book about a cloud that is rainy all the time, but all the other clouds around him are nice, so he has no friends. And he travels around everywhere trying to make friends, but everyone runs from him because they don't want to get wet. Someone get my publicist on the phone because I have a book to write. Next on the list, guys, we have the smartphone time traveler. One of the wildest things ever caught on camera is the footage from a Mike Tyson fight that looks like there's someone filming the fight in the background. The reason that this is so weird is because the footage is from 1995, and even though there were some phones back then that could have been considered smartphones, there was nothing released that had a camera on it. That wouldn't be released for another 5 years. And when you look at the footage, it seems like that phone is a very modern smartphone. Now, this could have been some device that simply looks like a phone, and people have been making the case to say that this is in fact a smartphone so they can argue that time travel is real, but really we have no idea what happened here. We have no idea who was recording this Mike Tyson fight with this mysterious device. Next on the list, guys, we have a plane vanishes. Now, there have been a lot of reports of all sorts of stuff like this. Like, apparently all of the alien stuff that happened in Roswell, New Mexico, that was all faked by the government because they were testing out experimental aircrafts, and they decided that making people think that aliens were real was safer than telling them what the military was up to. So what you're about to see might be some secret government aircraft caught on camera, or it might be a glitch. I mean, you all saw what I just saw, right? There was a plane there and then it was gone. Everyone was focused on it. It was in the sky and then it blinked out of existence like half the people in Avengers Infinity War. Also, random question for the comments. Would you rather be one of the people who blinked out of existence when Thanos snapped his fingers and then came back 3 years later to a whole new world? Or would you have rather been there the whole time and lived through the whole thing and saw the world post-snap? Well, whoever was on the plane seems like they didn't have a choice in disappearing because now they are for sure gone. Unless the sky is all a massive projection and that was just a glitch on one of the screens. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the Pope vanishes. Now, I will start off by saying I have no idea what the Pope does and what his powers are. Can he fly? Can he control the weather? Does he have telekinesis? I never went to church, so I don't know. So the clip that went viral of him vanishing about a year ago might be one of his holy powers, or it was a glitch that no one was supposed to see. Let's take a look. That was something that was seen from the Pope's balcony as he was addressing people about the COVID-19 pandemic. After his speech was done, he just vanished, and there were several news outlets that showed the exact same thing. So this wasn't just a broadcast that screwed up. Some say this might have been a hologram of the Pope because he was actually isolating somewhere and didn't want to catch the virus. I mean, we know that hologram tech is real. Most of us have seen that massive Tupac hologram that came out years ago. And if anyone has access to the latest and greatest hologram tech, it has to be the Pope.
Starting off this countdown, we have the warning. This individual actually received a signal from his parallel universe self, and had he not, he might have actually died. So the narrator, who wants to remain anonymous, let's call him Robbie, was out walking one day when he saw a version of himself across the street. At first, he thought he was just seeing things, but surely, right across the street was himself, just staring at him. He was dressed in identical clothing and everything. Robbie stopped and stared at him when all of a sudden his twin yelled out, "Run!" At that moment, a car came hurtling towards Robbie's twin. He saw himself get hit by the car, so he turned and he ran. And it's a good thing that he did, because seconds later, that same car came hurtling towards him. He looked back and Robbie in the car that hit him was gone, but there was a real accident that occurred right in front of his eyes. Had he not run, he would have been hit and killed. So he believes that his parallel universe self saved himself from dying. In our 9th spot today, we have the reverse signals. In 2016 and in 2018, scientists in Antarctica discovered radio pulses being emitted from the ground. The radio pulses detected high-energy neutrinos and were discovered by the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, otherwise known as ANITA. But here's the weird thing. The signals were coming up out of the Earth and heading towards the sky. Since the signals were coming up from the Earth instead of down from space, people believe that they may be traveling back in time and therefore from a parallel universe. For this universe, the Big Bang represents the end and not the beginning. Coming in at number 8, we have Euronymous. This story really freaking gives me the creeps. Basically, a Norwegian black metal fan believes that he's stuck in the wrong universe. So the story was posted by I Love Transylvania on Reddit. They asked for help and advice. It all started when he woke up and found out that his favorite musician, Euronymous, had died. But not recently. He died in 1993. Immediately, he thought that this was some kind of joke because just recently he had seen him in concert. The year he saw him was 2013, which is 20 years after his death, which is physically impossible. Not only that, but in the early 2000s, he bumped into him in a shop and even bought a record from him there. Not only that, but he can't seem to get in contact with any of his friends. He tries calling and texting, but their numbers are all out of service. So this guy either thinks he's going insane or he somehow got transported to another universe, our current one, in which Euronymous passed away in 1993. In our 7th spot today, we have the Man from Torrid. Now, this might be a perfect example of some accidental dimension jumping. Now, you might be sick of hearing me talk about this story, but it literally blows my mind. It's one of my favorite stories, so I'm sharing it again. For those of you who don't know, in July of 1954, a well-dressed man arrived at the Haneda Airport in Tokyo, Japan. When he was questioned at customs, he said he was from a place called Torrid. However, as we know, Torrid is not a real place. So immediately the officers were like, red flag, detain him. Later, he was placed in a hotel and was monitored by 2 guards. In the hotel, his room was placed high up and there was only one entry and exit point. Yet he still managed to escape. How he managed to escape is physically impossible. So, some people think that Torrid is a real place, but it's located in a different universe. And this man somehow passed through a parallel dimension and ended up at the airport. Others think that it's all just a made-up legend. If so, then why did the story get international news and wind up in the papers? I don't know, it's up to you. You believe whatever, but I think it's freaking creepy. Coming in at number 6, we have the parallel drivers. You're about to notice a trend here. A number of parallel universe stories feature cars and car accidents. It's quite weird, like this one. So this next guy was visiting his grandparents when he was almost hit by a car. So he was in a car park when a car nearly hit him and another car. As the car passed him, he got a look at the passengers. And that's when he knew that something was very off. In the car, there were 3 passengers, a woman, her daughter, and a male driver. What was weird is that they were all staring, looking forward, with no emotion on their face whatsoever. It looked as if they were all just zoned out or in another world, maybe quite literally. As the car continued driving by, he realized that it was his family's car. Freaking out, thinking that their car had been stolen, he ran to his family, only to find the car parked in the grandparents' driveway. Now, I don't have an explanation for this one. I really don't. But it seems like the people in that car were from another dimension. and were unaware that they were appearing elsewhere. Seems like the two universes might have merged for that second. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with deja vu. After all this time, scientists don't have a clear explanation for deja vu. They believe that everyday deja vu experiences might be linked to the memories in our temporal area, but they have yet to prove this or come up with any other explanations. Others believe that deja vu occurs when different universes are in sync for a short period of time. For example, maybe in one universe you picked up a bottle of wine to pour yourself a glass, but maybe a different version of yourself in another universe picked up a beer. This happened at the same time, so you're in sync for that moment. And that's when you get that feeling, like, didn't I just do this? It's because your other self did something similar. Coming in at number 4, we have precognitive dreams. Precognitive dreams are dreams that can predict the future, or they can provide you with information that you wouldn't have otherwise known. There are a number of people that have had this happen to them, including myself. I've had dreams and then the next day it's come true, and there's no possible way for me to have known that this was going to happen. In fact, we have a whole series on dreams that have predicted the future, so if you want, check that out as well. Anyways, one theory is that these dreams are signals from your other self in a different universe. Maybe something is about to happen in your life and has already happened in their life. Or they're sending you a signal in your sleep to warn you about upcoming dangers. Moving on to number 3, we have the change of route. A couple of years ago, the next narrator was walking to work one day when they all of a sudden had an urge to take a different path. Every day they took the same route, but today they decided to go down a different way. So they turned and went down an alley. Now, I mean, any normal person would be like, no, don't go down that creepy dark alley, you're gonna get mugged or killed. But something was telling this guy that he needed to go down that way. So he did. And that's when he zoned out. He said that his mind went scrambled. He also said, and I quote, "I felt like I didn't have a body anymore, just that I was a semi-conscious entity floating through some weird dimension. All of a sudden, in the array of different colors and shapes, a vision came to me. It was a bunch of strange-looking people that in my mind resembled businessmen in suits. They looked startled and panicked that I could see them. One of the people made a quick movement and everything turned black. Then when he snapped out of this, he found himself on a completely different street, back on his way to work." I don't have an explanation for this. Honestly, it seems like for a split second he was looking into another universe or something though. In our second spot, we have the close call. Several years ago, this guy worked at Little Caesars Pizza. He worked as one of those sign spinners, you know, to get people into the store. One day, while sign spinning, he saw a van heading straight at him. It drove over the curb and hit him directly. He felt it crush him against the street post. Then everything turned black. But all of a sudden, he gasped and he was awake and still alive. He's still on the corner and he's still holding his sign. No car was there, he was alive. Since he was shaken from the experience, he decided to go inside the store for his break. As he walked away, he heard a loud crash. As he turned around, he saw the same van crash into the street post where he had been standing. So maybe in another universe, he died from that car crash. In this universe, he survived. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the portal. There's a cabin in the Marcahuasi Stone Forest in Peru that apparently is a ticket to another dimension. This story was told by a woman who one day was out camping in the forest with her friends. That's when they heard music coming from another area in the forest, so they decided to follow the sound and check it out. Then they came across a small stone cabin. It was illuminated by torches. What was weird is that they could see in through the windows, and the people inside were wearing 17th century fashion. The women, being curious, decided to go check it out. In fact, one of the friends was a little too curious, and she tried entering the cabin. She stepped foot inside when her friend pulled her away. Instantly, half of her body became paralyzed. It was the half that entered the cabin. To this day, she still remains paralyzed on that side of her body. So it's believed that this cabin would have taken them to another dimension. Since half of her body entered another dimension and then was yanked out, it threw off her nervous system, resulting in her partial paralysis.
Alright, starting at number 10, unsanctioned connection. Reddit user Stars and Severance shared an experience they had when they were younger. When they were 12, they got their first phone for Christmas. Then, one night over the holidays, they had a crazy realistic dream. In the dream, they went to a girl's house making line faces out of construction paper. And the girl in this very vivid dream had long red hair and looked nothing like anyone they knew. Then, the next day after this dream, they got a text from an unknown number. It said something along the lines of, "You'll never guess who I am." And then after some back and forth guessing, thinking it's one of their friends, the number sends a picture of a lion plate, just like in the dream. Then the next photo is a selfie, and the person texting had long red hair. Then through other texting and a one-sided game of 20 questions, it turns out this girl with the red hair knows all about the person receiving the text messages. So then they text for about 3 days before the girl texting them said, "Lose my number, forget me." She stated, "They are mad because I reached out to you." And who's they? Well, the user who shared this story didn't question the arguments of the girl and deleted the number in the text, never hearing from the girl again. But this leads me to think, from a dream to reality, this girl appeared. One explanation is a parallel universe. Think about it. Dreams can sure be wild and weird, but what about those times it feels just like real life? Can that be another universe trying to make a connection without freaking us out? Maybe. Alright, let's look at another text.
Coming at number 9, we have sailing in the sky. If you have it in your mind that you will never reach the level of wealth to afford a sailboat, well, let me tell you that there's a whole other level of wealth that we have no idea about. There is a class of people who have been taking their boats to the skies. Are we all seeing that right now? I have no idea how reflections off the water will affect your camera and how it will pick that up, but that looks like someone got their boat to fly through the sky at a very reasonable pace. I mean, that boat is just cruising along, not too fast or slow. Sky sailing is a brand new thing, and this guy has already mastered it, but how on earth is that happening? Is there some new boat-shaped plane that we don't know about? I mean, that does sound like something that Elon Musk would make. Tesla has a car that looks like a tank, and now they have a plane that looks like a boat.
Next, at number 8, an unexplainable photo. So Reddit user Jake Venom had a scare 7 years ago when he found a photo on his phone he couldn't explain. He was making some iced tea with a new tea maker and sent a photo to his buddy's group chat when the previous photo in his phone caught his eye. The previous photo was supposed to be the screenshot from Twitter he sent to a friend last night, but it wasn't. It was a blurry photo of what he recognized as the kitchen of his childhood house. But he hadn't been to that house. He sent the Twitter screenshot before he went to bed, and then he sent the tea maker photo when he was making tea in the morning. So this obviously freaked him out. He said he kept having a weird feeling when he was looking at the photo and there was no reasonable explanation for it, so he ended up deleting it to stop feeling that uneasy feeling. But another Jake Venom in another timeline still lives in that house and took a photo in his kitchen that never showed up on his phone. I'm thinking it could be. These alternate parallel universes must be like so messed. And so these have been digital so far, but what about a person who says they are from a place that no one knows exists or doesn't exist? At number 7, from Lexaria. Back in 1851, a man who called himself Jofar Voren, or Joseph Voren, was found as he was wandering a German village. Joseph was speaking in broken German, but also spoke and wrote in unknown languages that he called Laxarian and Abramian. He said he was in Europe to find his long-lost brother, but he suffered in a shipwreck, as he came from Lexaria, which is in an area of Sakria. Now, if that doesn't ring a bell in your head, no, it didn't ring any bells for any of the officials trying to help this man out. He couldn't find where he was from. Any maps or globes didn't match what he knew. He called the 5 great continents of Earth Sakria, Alfar, Astar, Ulslar, and Yurplar, which doesn't match any of ours. People think he somehow fell into our universe from one much different from our own and much further away from where he anticipated to find his brother, but what do you think? But next, more of something different. At number 6, experiencing different days. This one comes from Stewie2Griffin34 on Reddit, who was watching another one of our parallel universe videos a couple months ago. It got them thinking of a weird day they themselves had. Their friend Kate, on break from her way to detention, said that their friend Nick wasn't in that day. But when they both got home, they got texts from both Nick and Kate saying that no, Nick was in school and detention and everything that day. And then Kate said that she hadn't told them that Nick wasn't in because she never took a break outside detention. So then they were all confused. And then on top of that, Nick said that he saw them go into the library that day and was at school, saying the user who posted this was just acting distant. Then the next day, the user trying to figure out what was happening, tried to get other opinions, and Nick's friends said, no, Nick wasn't in the day before. So was this a prank or different people experiencing different days? And I swear I remember when people tell me something specific and then they say, no, that never happened, and I get confused, so what is the truth? On to number 5, missing graveyard. Reddit user City Loves Chew says her mom was the one to have the trippy experience in this one. The mom in question was traveling with a friend in Old Lyme, Connecticut to a beach they often went to, Hawk's Nest Beach. They had free time one day and explored the area and ended up finding a cool cemetery called the Lord's Cemetery with a big red gate. They checked it out, took some cool pictures, and then left. No biggie. But the next day, they couldn't find the same spot again. They asked people in town, police officers, everybody, and no one had heard of it. They tried to find it in the years following, but couldn't find it, even with the help of Google Maps. Plus, the photos they took were gone. No explanation, which, when you think about it, is a grave experience from a parallel universe. And okay, that was a bad pun, we'll move on to the next one. Sorry. Next is number 4, from Denny's to Penny's. So, what if, suddenly, something so basic and normal to you was changed without question, and everyone then accepted it as the norm? Well, this happened to Reddit user is_emo. Back when they were a kid, they went to Denny's pretty often. So they were kinda shaken when one day, when they were young, their dad shook them awake and said, hey, we're heading to Penny's. And so they were all like, you mean Denny's, right? And their dad was like, no, Penny's. So they kind of accepted this, maybe it's a joke, and they roll up, but the yellow sign that is supposed to say Denny's is changed to Penny's. So now this kid is freaking out, but trying to keep cool, hide it, and yeah, you might be thinking this was just a one-day thing, maybe it was just shaken up, but no. They passed by this sign every day to school for a month, and all their friends at school kept saying it had always been Penny's anytime this person asked. But then, a month later, boom, Denny's again. So the kid asks his dad if it's changed, and their dad looks confused and asks, what do you mean? And so the kid plays it cool, but it shook them up for a while. Shook them up until they heard about possible parallel universes, and then it made total sense to them. What do you think Denny's is called in other universes? That's what I want to know. But anyways, the realization that there might be other universes doesn't come to everybody. At number 3, Guardian Angle. Now, a 28-year-old in Washington, D.C. named Lindsay got a scare from an unknown number. Whoever it was had bad spelling and used shortened text speak, sending sayings such as, Lindsay, I see you, with Lindsay misspelled and the words all in letter form. But this wasn't what scared her though, even though there was one text that said, I'm your guardian angle. What scared her is when she started getting texts about what she was doing currently, things that could only be described if someone was watching her, talking about her watching TV and saying they were standing right next to Lindsay. Lindsay had enough of this, it was freaking her out, and she called the number that she got from the landline, but the line said the number wasn't in service. Then the number texted her saying, why did you have to do that? And you know what you did. And so this was enough for Lindsay to get really shaken, so she got the police to help her investigate, but nothing came out of it. Now what I think is this was a trickster from a parallel universe playing a prank on her. But what do you think it could be? Something a little more paranormal? But moving on to number 2, unsent text. Sometimes the story doesn't come from the person who gets the wild text, but the person who gets the reaction to it. Reddit user Trodat5204 had her sister call her out of the blue over a text she allegedly sent her. Her sister said she sent a text saying, hey, insert some unusual pet names she sometimes calls her sister, I'm in this city now, I'm scared but it's okay and it's safe here. Your sister. So the person who posted this obviously censored their information, so that's why it reads kind of weird and I keep doing brackets. But anyways, her sister is calling her to demand to know why she's in a different city, why she got this text from a different number, and wants to know what's going on. So the person who got called clarifies the situation for her sister, and they call this other number together. But it just keeps on ringing. They couldn't reach what they thought to be a reasonable explanation, so the Reddit post says it could be maybe 3 things. 1, a coincidence. 2, a joke. Or 3, a parallel universe. Someone in another universe was scared and lost, but the text got sent to the wrong sister in the wrong universe. But on to number 1, alternate universe FaceTime. Reddit user Anonymous5000 left a story of what they described as a glitch in the Matrix story on the comments of another post. What they experienced they could only describe as a FaceTime call from another universe. This user is the father of a 6-year-old daughter, and they keep in touch over FaceTime when she stays at her mom's house. Well, he's talking to her daughter, having a long conversation over FaceTime, when she starts asking if her mommy and daddy are going to be together forever. He then gets confused because he's been separated from her mom for 3 years at that point. But she goes on to explain that no, they're together, and that when he comes home they all watch TV together. So she keeps talking until the reception cuts it off, and he calls back, kinda confused, and then his daughter is in different clothes. He laughs it off and asked if she hung up to change, and then this guy said his daughter said, "I never hung up. You just called me, Dad." So he says, "No, we were just talking on the phone," but she says, "No, they weren't." So then, as I would too, this guy freaked out. This Reddit user says the other call must have been from a parallel universe where the two parents were still together, and the guy gets the chills thinking about how it could have happened. Imagine the alternate universe daughter who's thinking her dad is rambling on about not being with her mom. Kinda wild.